If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 51, Ailen's Purpose. Run quickly. Hurry and escape. On this day, the villagers of Miyahara village encountered an unprecedented crisis. First, countless invisible terrifying monsters came to attack, destroying over half of the houses and trampling the farmlands into huge deep pits. Fortunately, the adults in the village took action and killed the invisible giant monsters. But soon after, even greater terror descended. The sky seemed to rumble endlessly like thunder. The adults with extraordinary power were killed one by invisible enemies. During this time, whenever someone showed signs of being able to see the Shinagamis, they would be instantly killed. Within minutes, nearly 1/5 of Miyahara village's villagers had died. The remaining villagers knew nothing at all, only able to frantically flee in all directions in terror. Under the slaughter of nearly 100 elite Shinagamis, all the Quincies who had conjured spirit bows were killed. Even behind the villagers who fled scattered in all directions, 1 or 2 Shinagamis tailed them. If the tailing Shinagami was unwilling to kill more, they would follow at a distance and give up tailing after confirming their target was an ordinary person without Ryutsu. And if the Shinagami tailing the villager was willing to wrongly kill rather than let go, then when they felt they were out of Captain Yukate's line of sight, they would directly strike down their target. Ailen blocked the one road to the east of Miyahara village. Any person escaping this way, the Shinagamis did not continue chasing. After all, this side was being guarded by a captain-class powerhouse personally. If they made a move against the people here, wouldn't that be looking down on a captain? Soon, the escaping villagers also discovered there were more survivors coming from this direction. Hurry, 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 go this way. Thus, more and more villagers rushed over following Ailen's direction in escape. One ragged villager after another ran past Ailen's side. As a Shinagami without a Jigai, ordinary humans couldn't see Ailen. Only those possessing Ryutsu could see Ailen standing in the middle of the road. The ordinary people who couldn't see Ailen would frantically sprint ahead with all their might. While the Quincies who could see Ailen were so frightened their entire bodies shuddered as they stood paralyzed. 13 Division's Guardians of Siraidii, Captain. As mortal enemies who had fought Shinagamis for nearly 1,000 years, how could the Quincies not know of the existences standing at the pinnacle of Shinagamis? Even when the 3 most powerful elders used soul dispersal gloves desperately, they didn't stand a chance at all. No one had imagined there would be another Shinagami captain present outside this village who hadn't made a move. No wonder the villagers escaping this way weren't being chased. With such a powerful figure here, what chance at survival could they still have left? However, upon seeing children being carried off by ordinary villagers, gratitude also rose within the Quincies' hearts. At the very least, the Shinagami captain before them didn't seem to harbor intentions of killing every single villager. As long as the children could survive, they didn't have any more regrets about their own lives. The skies were overcast by dark clouds as large raindrops poured down, seemingly holding a funeral for the last remaining Quincies. The Shinagamis had achieved complete success in encircling and suppressing the Quincy remnants this time. Having finished the slaughter, the Shinagamis were now conducting soul burials on the ordinary dead villagers, sending their souls towards Soul Society. Of course, the Quincy souls were directly annihilated, sending them into the world's cycle of reincarnation. We have you to thank this time, Captain Ailen. Captain Yukatake was conducting purification work in the village with the Shinagamis of the 13th Division while Yoryuki Shion brought Kisuke Urahara over before Ailen, smiling as she patted Ailen's shoulder. Through this incident of exterminating the Quincies, Yoryuki had found new beliefs under Kisuke Urahara's guidance, no longer entangled by her identity as a descendant of rebels. Facing Yoryuki's thanks, Ailen rolled his eyes. Frankly speaking, he had been schemed against by Yoryuki and Yukatake this time. Of course, as the son-in-law of the Kukaki family, neither the Central 46 Chambers nor Captain Commander Yamamoto would punish him over a single failed mission. Moreover, things were still good right now. Yoryuki didn't run into problems and the mission of annihilating the Quincies was perfectly completed. Ailen didn't have to become the scapegoat shouldered with responsibility for a failed mission. No, Captain Yoryuki. Don't speak of thanks first. Shaking his head, Ailen looked seriously at Yoryuki and Kisuke Urahara. If you really want to thank me, I'd like to ask Third Seat Urahara for a favor. Oh. Yoryuki and Kisuke Urahara exchanged a glance. The puzzlement in both their eyes could be seen. Within the 2nd Division, although Kisuke Urahara's strength was great, his lazy temperament and couldn't-care-less attitude meant the number of people who truly understood his abilities could be counted on one's fingers. Although Alan had spent over 30 years in the 2nd Division and was even vice-captain for close to 6 years, his interactions with Kisuke Urahara were few. Logically speaking, if Alan needed help with something, he should be asking Captain Urayuki. "May I ask what Captain Alan wants me to help you with?" After glancing at Captain Yukatake in the village and confirming his voice wouldn't travel to Yukatake, Alan softly said, "Third Seat Urahara, my wife Haruko Kokaki has shown signs of soul disruption and collapse 3 years ago. In recent years, Haruko's rate of soul collapse has sped up more and more. So I'd like to ask Third Seat Urahara to think of a way, some method of stopping Haruko's soul collapse." Getting Kisuke's help to research a method of preventing soul collapse, this was Alan's reason for so straightforwardly agreeing to come on this mission to the living world alongside Urayuki this time. In Alan's perspective, in the entire Shinigami world, the only 2 people capable of researching a method to prevent soul collapse would be 1. Kisuke Urahara, the intelligence ceiling of the Shinigami world. The other, Mayuri Kuratsuki, the mad scientist still locked up in the maggot's nest currently. After hearing Alan's words, puzzlement first flashed through Urayuki and Kisuke Urahara's minds over how Alan could be so certain Kisuke Urahara had a method to prevent soul collapse. But soon after, shock replaced that puzzlement. Soul collapse was a situation that generally only occurred among the souls of Rukanga. Many Rukanga residents possessed no Ryutsu. They would often suffer immense damage to their souls under the pressure exerted by Shinigami's Ryutsu. Without the protection and recovery of a physical body, souls that underwent trauma would start leaking away bit by bit, gradually weakening themselves. This was also why Seireidai would normally forbid Shinigamis from lingering in Rukanga districts for too long. Chapter 52, Coercion. Who is Haruko Kokaki? She is the eldest daughter of the 4 great noble clans in Soul Society. For thousands of years, since almost all Shinigamis in Soul Society lived in Seireidai, the people residing within Seireidai have been under the constant pressure of powerful Ryutsu. As such, ordinary souls simply cannot exist within Seireidai. Furthermore, in order not to let the powerful Ryutsu of Shinigamis harm the residents of Rukanga, the exterior of Seireidai was constructed using Seiketsu stones that can absorb Ryutsu to build the tall enclosing walls, and a giant barrier enveloping all of Seireidai called the T-Jaten was set up to prevent the diffusion of Ryutsu to Rukanga outside Seireidai. Those born within Seireidai inherently possess Ryutsu, allowing them to safely survive under the tremendous pressure of powerful Ryutsu. Naturally, Haruko Kokaki would be no exception. Otherwise, she wouldn't have lived until now without any problems. Right now, since Haruko Kokaki is showing signs of soul disruption and collapse, there can only be one possibility. After years of cohabitation with someone possessing powerful Ryutsu, the pressure has damaged her soul, causing her own soul to be unable to withstand the tremendous Ryutsu, thus weakening. And this powerful Ryutsu must have surpassed a captain's level, otherwise it couldn't have caused the weakening of someone with Ryutsu like Haruko. Who is Haruko Kokaki closest to? Alan. It was also after Haruko Kokaki married Alan that signs of her soul's disruption appeared. With that thought, just who possesses this powerful Ryutsu was self-evident. Urayuki Shihoin and Kisuke Urahara were shocked. If Alan hadn't told Urahara about Haruko's condition while asking a favor of him, perhaps no one would have known Alan had actually grown to such an extent. Even with confidence in themselves, for Urayuki and Urahara to reach a century captain's level would at least require another 50 years of cultivation. Soul disruption. Although Kisuke Urahara was curious why Alan would ask him for help, his habitual wariness still made him press down the brim of his hat. "Oh my, Captain Alan thinks too highly of me. I'm nothing more than a mere third seat. How could I possibly?" However, Kisuke wasn't able to finish speaking. Because before he could complete that sentence, the 2 words uttered from Alan's mouth forced him to swallow back the latter half of his words. At the same time, Urayuki Shihoin also pulled Kisuke Urahara away in that instant as she stared at Alan with a solemn expression. "Who exactly are you? How do you know about that?" "Captain Urayuki, third seat Urahara, don't bother with who I am. I only want to know right now if third seat Urahara can help resolve Haruko's issue of soul disruption. What you 2 want to do has nothing to do with me. I won't interfere with you guys. I only wish for Haruko to regain her health. As long as Urahara can resolve Haruko's issues, I'll owe you a favor." Facing away from Urayuki Shihoin and Kisuke Urahara, Alan didn't react at all to their wariness. If not necessary, he didn't want to provoke Urahara. Even when asking Urahara for help, it was only after Aelin had assisted Yoryuki first that he brought it up. Unfortunately, Aelin had clearly overestimated how much his assistance this time was worth to Urahara, forcing Aelin to reveal Urahara's greatest secret at present. Captain Yoryuki, 3rd Seat Urahara, I will be staying in the living world with Captain Yukitake for the next period to annihilate Quincy's and other locations. I hope that when I return to Soul Society next time, I'll get to hear some good news. Otherwise, I can only take matters into my own hands. After saying this, Aelin walked straight into the village to tell Yukitake that he was willing to carry out the mission of annihilating Quincy's together with him. How does he know about it? Just who exactly is he and what is he trying to do? Watching Aelin's departing back, Kisuke Urahara's eyes narrowed slightly. Too little information and most of it doesn't match up either. What a troublesome fellow. Aelin remained in the living world partly to reduce the pressure his Ryutsu had placed on Haruko Yukitake, and also to give both sides a way out for himself, Yoryuki, and Urahara so their relationship wouldn't become too rigid. He hoped Urahara would give him a satisfactory answer the next time Aelin returned to Soul Society. Otherwise, he could only resort to coercing Urahara for the Hagyaku's sake and for Haruko's sake. Whoosh! 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 Under a roaring waterfall, a 7 to 8-year-old boy gritted his teeth as he gathered the surrounding spirit particles onto his spirit bow, training his archery against the waterfall. Each time he drew his bow, the spirit bow in his left hand would quiver unstably. Sometimes it would even directly collapse. As the sun slid down from its peak, the young boy's entire body dripped with sweat while his breathing grew rather rushed. The thumb and index finger of his right hand had also split open, dripping blood from between his fingers. Sigh. The boy let his head droop dispiritedly. The first step of a Quincy's cultivation was to be able to steadily materialize their spirit bow. Only with a steady spirit bow could they shoot powerful arrows. Unfortunately, even after 3 months of cultivation, he still hadn't mastered shooting 500 arrows in one go. His spirit bow wasn't thoroughly stabilized either. Rest a bit if you're tired. At this time, a voice sounded out. The boy turned to see a youth in white jinbei sitting by the riverside. 2 cooked fish on the campfire before the youth were already giving off an alluring aroma. Gathering spirit particles underfoot, although the amount wasn't enough for the boy to truly tread on air, they served well enough as footholds atop the water's surface. After the boy sat down, Aelin passed a grilled fish to him. Training a bit past one's limits can indeed improve one's strength, but pushing way too far beyond one's limits is simply seeking death. Half a year had passed since Aelin arrived in the living world. Although he claimed to be annihilating Quincy's together with the 13th Division, Aelin was actually just wandering the living world alone. Since the living world was still in the Warring States period, aside from the nicer environment, there was nothing else attracting Aelin at all. Therefore, after a chance encounter with this village potentially housing Quincy's at some waterfall a mountain away, Aelin simply constructed a bamboo hut below the waterfall and decided to annihilate this group of Quincy's someday he felt like returning to submit his mission. What Aelin didn't expect was that before he had even actively searched the village for Quincy's, a young Quincy boy would frequently visit the waterfall near Aelin's dwelling to practice archery. Chapter 53, Tsukinishida. Over this period of time, the young boy had gotten quite familiar with Aelin and knew that Aelin was no ordinary person who could see his bow and arrows. But if I don't work hard, I won't have enough power to protect everyone the next time those terrifying hollows or Shinigami appear. As he accepted the grilled fish from Aelin, the boy shook his head while eating, refuting Aelin's words. Hollows? Shinigami. Shinigami and hollows are the 2 most powerful enemies of us Quincy's. The boy hesitated for a bit before finally recalling that the person before him who could see his bow and arrows definitely wasn't an ordinary person either. Moreover, due to the tragedy that occurred half a year ago, among the entire village now, he was the only one left who could sense Rishi. The lives of the entire village rested upon his shoulders. This kind of pressure would have driven anyone else crazy if not for the boy's strong will. Now that he had finally met someone else who could see spirits like him, the boy also wished to pour out the pressure in his heart to relieve some of his own stress. Next, the boy picked some things he knew from the documents passed down in the clan to tell Aelin, while also adding in his own personal experiences. It was around half a year ago when the village we lived in was attacked by over 100 hollows. Thanks to the efforts of the adults in our village, the invading hollows were quickly killed. However, perhaps due to the commotion during our battle attracting the attention of hostile forces, we suffered an assault from Shinigami's afterwards. In the end, although we escaped from the Shinigami's pursuit, our entire Quincy clan was reduced to me as the only one left who can see and wield the tools passed down by our elders. Perhaps I'm the last Quincy left in this world. Aelin quietly listened to the boy's account. He hadn't expected that the village he finally found traces of Quincy's in was actually the remnants of the group of Quincy's from Miyahara village half a year ago. The reason he hadn't been able to confirm any Quincy's existed in this village wasn't because the Quincy's here were in hiding too deeply. Rather, after the battle half a year ago, all the villagers who escaped were ordinary people. The Quincy's of Miyahara village had all perished there. The traces of Reishi he sensed originated from the little rascal before him. Without the elders' guidance and relying solely on cultivation from the documents left behind by the elders, adding on to the boy's average aptitude at best, his maximum potential would probably only reach an elite Shinigami's level. At this time, Aelin had some guesses towards the boy's identity. Thus, Aelin directly asked, "Little rascal, after knowing each other for so long, I still don't know your name." "Ishida." "Uncle, my name is Skin Ishida." When speaking of his clan's name, the boy proudly puffed out his chest. This was the pride ingrained deeply into his bloodline. From the clan records spanning over 900 years, among the Quincy bloodline, aside from the Kurosaki pure bloods, the Ishida clan was another that remained purely Quincy's. As expected. Aelin shook his head. Perhaps this was just destiny. "Shin, Ishida, you just said you Quincy's have two great enemies. Have you never considered that I might be one of them?" Hearing Aelin finish speaking, Skin Ishida complexion paled. Oh right, how did he overlook that? Half a year ago, Skin Ishida had seen hollows before. This uncle definitely wasn't a hollow. Then could he be the archenemy of Quincy's, a Shinigami? Realizing this, Skin Ishida hurriedly tossed aside the grilled fish in his hands as his concentration reached an unprecedented level. A bracelet with a Y pattern hung from his left wrist. After channeling his Ryoryoku into it, a blue Reishi bow materialized. Gathering Reishi underfoot, after practicing it for months already, Skin Ishida instantly fled far away from Aelin through Hyrankyaku. Then drawing back his right hand, the surrounding Reishi gathered onto his bow, forming a Reishi arrow aimed right at Aelin. Uncle, just who are you?" Due to fright, Skin Ishida's voice even carried a trembling tone. "As you can see, I'm a Shinigami." Next, Aelin turned his body sideways to face Skin Ishida. Extending his right thumb at the 6 on his captain's Hayori, he said, "Moreover, I'm one of the 13 captains standing at the pinnacle of Shinigamis. And if nothing unexpected happens, I was one of the Shinigamis who encircled and suppressed you guys half a year ago." "What?" Skin Ishida's pupils abruptly contracted. The pain of losing his clansmen overwhelmed his fear, replaced by hatred. "Yah! I'll kill you!" Whoosh! Whoosh! Letting go, the arrow on his bow directly shot at Aelin. Then, gathering Reishi underfoot once more, Skin Ishida accelerated his body through Hyrankyaku, encircling Aelin as he unleashed a 360-degree attack without blind spots. Bang! Bang 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 bang! Facing Skin's assault, Aelin didn't even budge. The incoming arrows couldn't injure Aelin whatsoever upon impact and were directly shattered apart by Aelin's body. Although Aelin hadn't continued forging new Zanpakuto for over 2 years already, his Ryoryoku didn't increase by much during this time either. Even so, Aelin's personal Ryoryoku had still crossed the level of a century captain. Otherwise, it wouldn't have caused Haruko's soul to weaken. As for Ishida's skin right now? In terms of Shinigami Ryoryoku rankings, he probably possessed around rank 18 Ryoryoku at best. Comparable to students who had just entered the Spiritual Arts Academy. The power behind Skin's arrows capped out at around level 1 destructive spell Pale Lightning at best. Arrows with such low Reishi density couldn't even compare to the Reishi density within Aelin's body. How could they possibly injure Aelin? Even if Aelin simply stood there allowing Skin free attacks without defending himself, Skin still wouldn't be able to scrape off a single flake of skin from Aelin's body after 100 years. Naturally, the attacking Skin Ishida witnessed this scene. At this time, the powerlessness against Shinigamis from half a year ago and the terror from confronting a Shinigami captain directly resurfaced within Skin's mind once more. Retreat. After regaining his rationality, Skin attacked Aelin while slowly retreating back towards the forest. The moment he entered the woods, he would immediately flee without even returning to the village. From how they managed to escape Miyahara village half a year ago, Skin knew that under normal circumstances, Shinigamis would only pursue Quincy's while leaving ordinary people alone. He didn't know what happened to the villagers who fled in other directions, but the villagers who escaped this way besides the Quincy's didn't suffer any harm in the end if they were just ordinary people without Ryoryoku. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to establish a new village again in just half a year either. Chapter 54, The reason why the Quincy's were surrounded and suppressed. As long as he escaped, the Shinigami would not make a move on the villagers. No, he should say, whether or not he could successfully escape, this person would not make a move on the villagers. Hey, since I haven't finished speaking, isn't it a bit rude for you to leave? Seeing Kanishida trying to escape, Aelin lifted his head. Bakud number 1, sigh. Ah. As Aelin chanted in a low voice, Kanishida let out a cry. The hands he was shooting arrows with were directly pried open by a huge force and pulled back behind him. Crack! The Reishi bow in Kanishida's hands immediately collapsed. A wooden stalk, condensed from Reishi, tightly locked his hands behind his back. The uncontrollable movement of his hands directly threw Kanishida into chaos. The Reishi under his feet also dissipated without Kanishida's control, causing him to fall to the ground. It's over. Despair filled Kanishida's eyes. Could it be that the Quincy bloodline would be completely extinguished from him? Bakud number 4, crawling rope. The Shinigami's voice rang out in Kanishida's ears. In the next moment, a rope condensed from Ryutsu wrapped around Kanishida's body and pulled back. Ah! Pulling the paralyzed Kanishida back to the campfire, Aelin dispersed the Ryutsu from the rope in his hand. Even the Bakud that had bound Kanishida's hands was removed by Aelin. Regaining his freedom, Kanishida didn't dare run away at all right now. Although he didn't know why this enemy of the Quincy's, a captain of the 13 Division's Guardians of Siraidii, hadn't killed him yet, Kanishida could still feel that if he dared attack the other party again or try escaping, he would probably be killed in the next second. From the brief clash earlier, he already knew that if the other party wanted to kill him, it would be no more difficult than crushing an ant. Kanishida. Yes. Earlier you said the Quincy's have two great enemies, Hollows and Shinigamis. Seeing how you called me uncle, I'll tell you why Hollows and Shinigamis are enemies of you Quincy's. Hollows are what human souls become after death if they harbor attachment and reluctance to let go of the human world, refusing to be sent on by Shinigamis to soul society. After falling and becoming hollows, the attachments they harbor towards the human world leave a void in the hollows' hearts. To fill the void in their hearts, hollows devour human souls. From this point, it's not excessive to call hollows the enemies of all living beings. Kanishida nodded. He understood a bit about this from the remnants of documents left in his clan. For the most part, it was the same as what Aelin said. Next is the conflict between Shinigamis and Quincy's. Before talking about this issue, let me first introduce the structure of the world we're in. Seeing Kanishida listening attentively, Aelin faintly nodded. Project. Blue Reishi gathered in Aelin's hand, eventually condensing into a straight tree branch. When forging non-sword weapons using no sword style, the weapon's grade would drop by 1 level. What Aelin had just projected was a relatively straight tree branch from a nearby tree. Because Aelin didn't attach any sword concept to this tree branch, the tree branch he projected wasn't a sword this time. With its prototype being fresh and vibrant green, after dropping a level in Aelin's hands, it turned into a withered, dried-up branch, just right for use. Using this withered branch, Aelin drew a large circle on the ground before Kanishida, then drew 3 smaller circles within the large circle. The structure of the world we're in is roughly like this. This is the human world. This is Hueco Mundo. And this is Soul Society. Humans live in the human world. Human souls that fall after death and become hollows enter Hueco Mundo. Souls guided on by Shinigamis enter Soul Society. Aside from evil people who fall into hell, human souls generally reincarnate between these 3 worlds. These 3 worlds maintain a subtle balance based on the amount of souls they contain. If the number of souls in one world becomes excessive or too scarce, it would throw off the balance between the 3 worlds and lead to their destruction. Shinigamis exist to maintain stability between the 3 worlds. Whenever an imbalance of souls occurs in one of the worlds, Shinigamis would make some of the souls in Soul Society reincarnate or enter Hueco Mundo for purification depending on the situation. And this is what Shinigamis do. The Quincy's only protect humans in the human world. From the big picture of the entire world, with the Shinigamis regulating everything, at most they would only cause more work for Shinigamis. The impact isn't actually that huge. But Aelin circled the large circle on the ground several times with his tree branch. Kanishida, do you know that the total number of souls our world contains has never increased? I don't know. Slap. Ow. Now you know. Withdrawing the tree branch he used to smack Kinishida's head, Aelin continued explaining. Because, this is a major reason why Shinigami started the extermination campaign against Quincy's. What? Kinishida jerked his head up in astonishment. The world's total soul count has never increased, and this is actually the reason why Quincy's were surrounded and suppressed by Shinigamis? Well, of course, there was also an even bigger reason, and that is how the current Quincy's are actually remnants from the fallen Empire of Light more than 900 years ago. Do you know the difference when Shinigamis and Quincy's slay hollows? When Shinigamis slay hollows using their Ryoryoku, the hollow souls disperse back into the cycle of reincarnation. But when Quincy's use their power of Quincy, Volstandig to destroy hollows, it completely eradicates the hollows' existences. Staring at Kinishida, Aelin slowly asked, Kid, tell me, if the Quincy's continue eradicating hollows like this, continuously reducing the number of souls in the world, after hundreds of years, how many souls do you think would remain in this world? Without enough reincarnating souls to replenish itself, what would this world turn into? Kinishida's face turned deathly pale as beads of cold sweat slid down his forehead. According to the description from the Shinigami before him, if Quincy's were allowed to continue eradicating hollows without end, the world would indeed change in that way after a long time. Quincy's would actually become the source of the world's destruction? Staring at his own hands, bewilderment filled Kinishida's heart. Putting an end to the world-destroying Quincy's with his own hands seemed to not actually be a bad thing. Kill me. Kinishida closed his eyes, resigned to his fate. Oh? You're that eager to die? No, I don't wish to die, but after hearing what you said, I also feel like Quincy's shouldn't exist in this world. Humph, I didn't expect a brat like you to have some vision for the big picture. However, I absolutely detest situations where someone has to be killed for the greater good or whatever. Chapter 55, Surveillance. Hearing Aelin say this, a glint flashed through Kinishida's eyes. If possible, he naturally also hoped he wouldn't have to die. Little Ishida brat, I have a way for you to live, it just depends on whether you are willing to pay the price. Please tell me. With his own life on the line, Kinishida also respectfully stood before Aelin to listen. I just told you earlier, the greatest fault of Quincy's lies in their power of destruction. You can continue completing a Quincy's cultivation, you can also get married and have children, passing Quincy's down through the generations. However, from now on, the Quincy's of your bloodline will all need to leave their names in Soul Society and accept the supervision of Shinigami. When you encounter hollows, you can battle hollows to protect the people of the human world from harm. But you cannot directly kill the hollows. You can contact the stationed Shinigami for the Shinigami to complete killing the hollow, sending the hollow soul into the cycle of reincarnation. What do you think, can you agree to this? This was the idea that appeared in Aelin's mind for how to allow Quincy's to continue existing after knowing this child was called Kinishida. Kinishida's aptitude wasn't good and he wasn't very strong. But he had a genius son and a grandson favored by fate. At the very least, before attaining power rivaling Wywak, Aelin still wished for those who could block Wywak's path to be born. Only for some reason, when saying these words, a thought rose up in Aelin's mind. Over 100 years later, when the Quincy's surrounded and attacked Kinishida until his strength ran out and he was killed by the hollows, were the words he said today also a contributing factor? Based on the duration of the battle, Kinishida definitely had enough strength to kill all the hollows attacking him. But because of that shortcoming of a Quincy's power of destruction kills hollows and annihilates the hollows' souls, reducing the total number of souls in the world, Kinishida didn't rise with the intention of destroying hollows from beginning to end. If Kinishida was born in Naruto's world, he would definitely be like those two of the Uchiha clan, possessing the mentality of Hokage. I agree. As expected, even if it meant being monitored by Shinigami and losing some freedom, Kinishida, who valued the world, still chose to agree. Then go practice by yourself. When the Shinigami in charge of purification in the human world come here for their shift, I'll introduce you guys. Having put down the greatest weight in his heart, the rested Kinishida continued practicing under the waterfall. After that previous exchange with Aelin, the potential Kinishida erupted with made him improve greatly during his recent cultivation. In just the short few days, he completed the first step of a Quincy's cultivation, successfully manifesting a steady spirit bow. Now, Tsukunishita could thump his chest and say he was a mature Quincy. Within the Kukaki household's courtyard in Soul Society, white light suddenly lit up. A massive amount of spirit particles gathered within the radiance, condensing into 2 sets of doors. Boom! When the doors fully solidified, they slid open to both sides, revealing in space channel emitting white light. Next second, Ailen's figure appeared from within the Senkaimon. When going to the human world, Ailen and the 2nd Division members used the 13th Division's Senkaimon. When returning, there was no need to go through so much trouble. He could just directly use the Kukaki household's Senkaimon to return to the Kukaki clan. Although Senkaimons were said to be under the monitoring of the 13 divisions on the surface, which noble house in Soul Society didn't privately control a few Senkaimons of their own to the human world. As one of the 4 great noble clans, the Kukaki clan naturally also possessed a Senkaimon to the human world. Sensing the Ryotsuo at home, Ailen first walked towards the backyard. It was still a familiar scene. Beneath the cherry blossom tree, white-haired, white-bearded Jinrei Kukaki stood watching over Byakuya's training. Byakuya's aptitude was very high. At the very least, Jinrei felt he had the potential to surpass himself. However, the young Byakuya's mentality was unstable. If he didn't watch over him, who knows where he might run off to play. Suddenly, Jinrei opened his eyes. "You've returned." I'm back, father-in-law." Ailen stood by Jinrei's side, watching Byakuya practice his swords together. "Byakuya has grown a lot in the half-year I haven't seen him. Based on Byakuya's current rate of improvement, he should have hopes of attaining the birth of his Zanpakut in around 3 years and complete the release of his Zanpakut." Ailen was nearly 40 when he completed the pregnancy and birth of his Zanpakut, and if not for his powerful abilities, perhaps his level now would still only be bottom seat of a division. Yet Byakuya had already attained such strength before 20. Within a century, he would definitely be able to complete the training for Bankai. But compared to you, Byakuya still falls far behind." Jinrei Kukaki nodded. Byakuya talent went without saying, and surpassing him was only a matter of time. However, regardless of how confident Jinrei felt towards Byakuya, he still only felt Byakuya had hopes of breaking past the level of a century captain. To truly want to reach that boundary, Byakuya would still need over 300 years of cultivation at the minimum. Yet this son-in-law of his had already reached this boundary 3 years ago, if not even longer ago. If not for Haruko's situation, this secret might not have been discovered by anyone until now. Speaking of which, that's right, half a year ago, 2nd Division Captain Yoriyuki Shion and her 3rd seat Kisuke Urahara came by the Kukaki household saying you had entrusted them to take a look at Haruko's situation. During this time, they've taken Haruko with them for a period every so often. Each time Haruko returns, her condition has improved greatly. So I didn't interfere. Today is the day Haruko goes to their place again, so you don't need to worry. Ailen nodded. When he didn't sense Haruko's Ryotsu at the Kukaki household, Ailen already had some guesses. In the end, Kisuke Urahara and Yoriyuki Shion still chose to take action to help Haruko. "Uncle." At this time, having finished his practice, Byakuya noticed Ailen's presence. Sheathing his sword, he ran over to Ailen. "Uncle, let's compete in Shunpo. That cat monster said I have to at least beat you before having the qualifications to challenge her." "Oh? Captain Yoriyuki actually said that?" Ailen's brows quirked up slightly as he felt somewhat amused inside. When it came to Shunpo, Yoriyuki's attainment had reached the peak. In all of Soul Society, not a single person could match Yoriyuki in Shunpo. That was also why Yoriyuki had the title Goddess of Flash. Perhaps only Royal Guard Tenjir Kairanji's attainments in Shunpo could surpass Yoriyuki's. But unfortunately, Ailen was that exception. During these 3 years, for Haruko's sake, Ailen hadn't forged any new Zanpakut, so his Ryoryoku didn't increase by much. But this didn't mean Ailen's strength didn't increase greatly. Chapter 56, Teaching Byakuya. Over these past 3 years, Ailen had been diligently cultivating every night, absorbing the experiences from the Zanpakutos masters that he had forged to comprehensively elevate his strength, resolving the issue of needing the corresponding weapons in hand to utilize abilities of that level of power. It could be said, compared to the Ailen of 3 years ago, without utilizing his Zanpakuto, although not instant defeat, the current Ailen now possessed the ability to defeat his past self from 3 years ago in a short amount of time. Within Soul Society, the only ones who could surpass the present Yoriyuki Shihoin in Shunpo were the Yoriyuki in the future. Coincidentally, Aelin happened to be the person who possessed Yoryuki's Shunpo attainments from over 200 years later. Yoryuki said Byakuya would at least have to surpass Aelin before having the qualifications to challenge her. Aelin truly wondered what sort of expression Yoryuki would reveal when Byakuya surpassed him in Shunpo and went to challenge her. Byakuya nodded. The last time he challenged that cat demon ended in failure. The cat demon indeed said those words afterwards. Alright then, since that's the case, I'll accompany you to play for a bit, Byakuya. Regarding Aelin calling it play when comparing skills with him, Byakuya didn't feel like there was anything wrong with it at all. Unlike that cat demon, Byakuya sincerely respected Aelin from the bottom of his heart. His father, Byakuya's grandfather Shun Kokaki, was killed by the Koga 6 years ago. It was uncle who beheaded Koga, retrieving the Kokaki clan's glory. Moreover, from Byakuya's understanding, Koga had even defeated the captains of the 9th and 7th divisions. He was an extremely powerful enemy, yet he was still slain by Uncle Aelin. This showed how much more powerful Uncle Aelin was compared to the average captain. Then allow me to make the first move, Uncle. A trace of excitement flashed through Byakuya's eyes. Spiritual energy fluctuating underfoot, he rapidly closed in on Aelin, reaching out a hand towards Aelin. However, when Byakuya's hand made contact with Aelin, Byakuya suddenly discovered that this was merely an afterimage. The true Uncle Aelin had already appeared behind him, a hand pressing down on Byakuya's shoulder. Byakuya was greatly alarmed. He hastily utilized Shunpo to dodge. In an instant, afterimages filled the entire backyard. Yet no matter how Byakuya dodged, Aelin would always appear behind him with a hand pressed on Byakuya's shoulder. Moreover, from start till now, Byakuya had never once caught sight of Aelin's figure within his own eyes. This made Byakuya feel that his uncle's Shunpo seemed to actually be stronger than that cat demon's. Byakuya, your Shunpo has taken the wrong path. After pressing down on Byakuya's shoulder once more, Aelin exerted a bit more strength into his hand, directly interrupting Byakuya's Shunpo and pinning him in place. From this bout of practice with Byakuya, Aelin could sense that Byakuya's usage of Shunpo was far too inflexible. Byakuya, based on your understanding, what is the main purpose behind a Shinigami's use of Shunpo? Byakuya blanked for a second before answering, Isn't Shunpo used to accelerate one's speed, allowing them to close in on the enemy faster? As expected. Hearing Byakuya's reply, Aelin shook his head. No wonder all of Byakuya's Shunpo movements were simply linear dashes focused solely on increasing speed without the slightest variation, making it very easy for others to see through. If the only purpose of Shunpo was that, then Byakuya, do you think Shunpo would be able to stand alongside Zanjutsu, Hakuta, and Kid as the Shinigami's 4 fighting styles? Byakuya was dumbfounded. The Shinigami 4 fighting styles were very powerful, right? In Byakuya's perspective, a Shinigami's strength was deeply intertwined with their Zanpakuto's abilities. If one possessed a very powerful Zanpakuto, the increase in the Shinigami's strength would be tremendous. Just look at the requirements to become a captain of the 13 Division's Guardians. One must attain Shikai at the minimum. The outcome of many Shinigami battles were only decided after releasing their Zanpakuto. Seeing how Byakuya was, Aelin shook his head. Turning towards Jinrei Kokaki, he said, Father-in-law, I'm bringing Byakuya out for a bit. Please help keep an eye on things at the 6th Division for today. Go ahead. I'll pay attention to matters at the 6th Division. Jinrei Kokaki nodded. Previously when Byakuya trained alone, he didn't feel anything out of sorts. But after witnessing Byakuya's spar with Aelin today, many issues had indeed been exposed. On this point, Jinrei felt that he had to bear huge responsibility. Perhaps due to his advanced age causing a decline in vigor, Jinrei's guidance towards Byakuya relied more on verbal instruction. Coupled with how Jinrei felt that he didn't have much time left, he believed the fastest way for Byakuya to elevate his strength was by attaining Shikai. This resulted in Byakuya gaining the notion that a Zanpakuto's power is the most crucial. Fortunately, besides himself, the Kokaki clan now had the even more powerful Aelin. Otherwise, Jinrei truly didn't know that under his influence, Byakuya could have potentially deviated down the wrong path. Whoosh! Carrying Byakuya along, Aelin's entire body transformed into a blur, shooting towards Rukonga. The overwhelming speed caused everything in Byakuya's vision to become an indistinct blur. The air pressure even blew Byakuya's hair into a mess akin to a right-leaning broom. Very quickly, Aelin brought Byakuya through the White Road Gate and left Siraidai, entering Rukonga. The 4 great gates of Shirai only obstructed Rukanga souls from entering Shirai. They didn't block Shinagamis from traversing between Rukanga and Shirai. It was just that because many Rukanga-born Shinagami ultimately didn't join the 13 Division's Guardians and were instead used as cannon fodder, sent to the expeditionary forces in Hueco Mundo, the residents of Rukanga didn't have a very favorable impression towards Shinagamis from Shirai. After entering Rukanga, Ailen's speed increased another level. If Byakuya's vision of his surroundings were blurred when carried by Ailen in Shirai, now in Rukanga, everything in Byakuya's eyes seemed to stretch out. He basically couldn't make out anything. A minute later, Ailen came to a stop at a deserted area and set Byakuya down. Ugh! The sudden transition from high speeds to a standstill made Byakuya feel dizzy and nauseous. He dry-heaved several times before slowly recovering. Where is this place? Looking at the desolate, lifeless hills around them, Byakuya felt somewhat baffled. From birth until now, he had never stepped foot out of Shirai before. A scene devoid of human presence like this was Byakuya's first time witnessing. This is District 78 of Rukanga. The further Rukanga is from Shirai, the more extreme the environment becomes while district numbers increase. There won't be any signs of life within a radius of 10 kilometers here. It's just right for some practice. Practice. Byakuya raised his head to look at Ailen. He naturally knew what the meaning of practice was. But was there a need to come to such a remote area for that? Byakuya, do you know how Shinagamis fought before Zanpakutos came into existence thousands of years ago? Why do you think only Zanjutsu, Hakuda, Ho, and Kid were named the Shinigami 4 fighting styles after so many years? Chapter 57, 4 Shinigami Fighting Techniques. Byakuya, next, you will get to properly experience just how powerful these Shinigami 4 fighting techniques that you've neglected are. Then, under Byakuya Kukaki's bewildered gaze, Ailen drew out his Zanpakut from his waist. Watch closely, Byakuya. This is swordsmanship. After reminding Byakuya Kukaki, Ailen raised the Zanpakut in his hand and fiercely swung it down. Whoosh! An over 100-meter tall sword slash shot out faster than Byakuya could react, cutting across several hills. The next moment, under Byakuya's shocked gaze, the upper halves of these hills slid down diagonally, crashing into the ground with a loud boom, kicking up tall plumes of dust. Although they were very far away, Byakuya could still tell that the exposed cross-sections of the hills were as smooth as mirrors. I don't know what other people's swordsmanship techniques are like. This was a lie. But to me, swordsmanship means the instant my sword is swung down, everything in front of me will be cut asunder. Nothing will remain unsevered. This was the truth. The Zanpakut and Jetsu that belonged to 10th Division Captain Ishin Shiba had been forged by Ailen while he and Koga were locked up in 9th Division's prison. Based on Injetsu's Moonfang Heaven Through principle, Ailen forged an object from the One Piece world. Wado Ichimonji. This was a weapon that belonged to a hermit swordsman from the One Piece world, Shimotsuki Kozaburo. Through this weapon, Ailen gained mastery over sword techniques like Iron Cut and Flying Slash that were completely unlike a Shinigami's swordsmanship. The earlier slash was a flying slash unleashed purely through Ailen's own attainment in swordsmanship without using any Ryoryoku. Byakuya's eyes widened as his jaw nearly dropped. Pointing at the hills neatly bisected in the distance, he stammeringly asked Ailen, this is swordsmanship. That's right, it's swordsmanship. But this is my cutting technique. After sheathing his Zanpakut, Ailen beckoned Byakuya over. Next, attack me and I'll show you my skill in Hakuda. Okay. Byakuya immediately drew his Zanpakut and rushed at Ailen, swinging his sword. However, no matter how Byakuya attacked, Ailen's body seemed to flutter like a drifting dandelion seed, narrowly avoiding Byakuya's slashes by a hair's breadth each time. This is paper painting, comprehending the rhythm of the wind and moving your body along with your enemy's attacking momentum to dodge their strikes. Suddenly, Ailen, who had only been dodging, halted his movements. Caught completely unprepared, Byakuya couldn't pull back his full-powered swing that was already slicing towards him. He could only watch on in alarm as his blade descended on his uncle. Uncle! Clang! Byakuya had just cried out when he felt his sword seem to collide with steel. Not only did it not harm his uncle Ailen in the slightest, the immense recoil even numbed Byakuya's palm. This is... How is this possible? Byakuya was stunned speechless. What kind of body was this? Even swords couldn't injure it at all? Continue attacking me. Yes. Hearing Ailen's voice, Byakuya reflexively resumed his assault. Clang! Clang! However, no matter how much strength Byakuya used, his sword couldn't even cut a single strand of Ailen's hair in the end. Instead, the immense vibrations bursting from the clashes opened up gashes on Byakuya's palms, causing droplets of blood to steadily drip down. Enough! 3 minutes later, Ailen flicked a finger, directly sending Byakuya's Zanpakuto flying until it stabbed into the ground far away. So powerful! Byakuya's eyes were blazing as he watched Ailen. With his adolescent mentality, the trace of pain in his hands was completely ignored by Byakuya in light of his admiration. What I just showcased to you was Hakuta's defensive side. Next, I'll show you Hakuta's offense and Kid's defense. Under Byakuya's eager gaze, Ailen directly released a high-level Bakud spell without any incantation. Bakud number 81 Severing Void. A dim golden radiance manifested before the two. The instant this barrier appeared, even Byakuya felt a powerful sense of security well up from within his heart. This is a rather powerful high-level Bakud with extremely high defensive ability. It can perfectly defend against had spells below number 90. Then Ailen clenched his fists tightly before fiercely punching out. Double bone. Boom. A massive blast of air erupted before Ailen's fists. The tremendous shockwave even blew Byakuya, who was behind Ailen, until he tumbled through the air. Ah! Even as he cried out involuntarily, Byakuya still kept his eyes firmly locked onto Ailen. In Byakuya's eyes, he witnessed the severing void barrier that his uncle claimed could perfectly defend against had below number 90 shatter like glass the instant it met his uncle's fist. The remnant force from Ailen's fists that hadn't dissipated completely even blasted the surrounding air into visible white shockwaves. These shockwaves continued forward and directly smashed apart the peak of a nearby hill that Ailen had chopped off previously. Boom! Only now did Byakuya, who had been sent flying, crash heavily into the ground, letting out a groan of "Ow!" Finally, kid! Only after Byakuya climbed to his feet did Ailen raise a hand again and continue explaining to Byakuya, if you don't have much basis for comparison regarding that previous Bakud's defensive power, after witnessing the kid technique I'm about to unleash, you'll have a deeper understanding of the level of offensive power behind my Hakuta. Because the kid I'm releasing now is a high-level had that can be perfectly blocked by Severing Void. Resplendent lightning radiance flashed before Ailen's right hand. The immense Ryoryoku fluctuations even whipped up gusts of wind rivaling the squall from earlier that blew Byakuya away. Had number 88 Flying Dragon striking heaven-shaking thunder cannon. Boom! Bluish-white radiance robbed Byakuya of his vision. For an instant, the entire world seemed to have faded away in Byakuya's eyes, leaving only that thunderous beam of light. Boom! A deafening explosion rang out. Byakuya's sight was flooded by dazzling bluish-white luminance. After Byakuya's vision returned to normal, all he saw was that a crescent-shaped tunnel now stood where Ailen had been before. The hills within this tunnel's trajectory had been smashed apart, leaving behind meter-wide circular cavities. So powerful! Ailen walked to Byakuya and looked at the still young and tender-faced youth. Byakuya, what do you think about the swordsmanship, Hakuta, and kid that I just displayed? Powerful! At this moment, Byakuya felt like he had wasted years' worth of reading. Besides powerful, he actually couldn't think of any other word in his vocabulary capable of describing what he witnessed his uncle display today. Invincible. Ailen shook his head. Saying powerful is fine, but invincible? There's still a huge gap if it's merely this much. Chapter 58, Farewell to Haruko. Ailen had enough understanding about himself. Was he strong? Yes, very strong, and might even become extremely strong in the future. However, he was still far from being invincible in the Soul Reaper world, at least in Ailen's opinion at the moment. He possessed the unlimited blade works, which allowed him to create swords with various abilities. Especially in a world like the Soul Reapers that had Zanpakuto, Ailen could endow many abilities into the Zanpakuto as the Shikai and Bankai to use. This point was also acknowledged by the ability of unlimited blade works. Because in this world, those were the abilities that belonged to swords. However, over the years, Ailen had been studying hard. Well, he took out all those powerful weapons from his memory and discovered that even with all of them, he still couldn't achieve invincibility among the Soul Reapers. Among them, the most unsolvable one was Ichib Hisub of the Royal Guard. His existence itself was equivalent to Soul Society. He was given the name Ichib by the Soul King and obtained the power of name-giving. All things named by Ichib Hisub possessed the power corresponding to their names. The names of everything in Soul Society were all given by Ichib Hisub. In addition, the essential nature of Ichimonji's existence was black. All the blackness in the world belonged to him. Relying on this essence, Ichimonji conceived the oldest Zanpakuto that had existed before the birth of Zanpakuto, Ichimonji. It could be said that except for the Soul King, Ichimonji was the invincible one among the Soul Reapers. It was precisely because Iwak possessed the ability of omniscience and omnipotence that he could ignore Ichimonji's power of blackness and naming and defeat him. When thinking of these two, Aelin felt somewhat pessimistic. Perhaps only after seeing Tenjir Kairanji and replicating his Zanpakuto, Kinpika, could he make Avalon based on Kinpika's abilities and stand in an undefeated place. As for defeating those two, at least in the two-dimensional weapons that Aelin knew of, there was still none that could do that. Unless he could create the divine weapons from those immortals and monsters and myths from his previous life, only then would he have the possibility of sweeping across the entire Soul Reaper world. Abandoning those thoughts in his mind, Aelin looked seriously at Byakuya Kokaki. Byakuya, I brought you here and showed you so much, do you know why? I don't know. Byakuya Kokaki lowered his head and admitted his own shallow ignorance. Here, I demonstrated to you the power of Zanjutsu, Hakuta, and Kid, 3 of the 4 Shinigami combat forms. So what do you think the realm of Shunpo that is ranked alongside them can reach? Aelin's words caused Byakuya Kokaki's pupils to shrink. That's right. Zanjutsu, Hakuta, and Kid possessed such great power. Then what kind of might would Shunpo, as one of the 4 Shinigami fighting techniques, have? If Zanjutsu, Hakuta, and Kid are to attack the enemy with the greatest power, then Shunpo is to dodge their attacks with the greatest speed. And after dodging, quickly get close to the enemy, pull them into your attack range, and launch relentless attacks on them. Shunpo can also perfectly integrate with Zanjutsu, Hakuta, and Kid to maximize their power for the Soul Reapers to exert. Byakuya, you are the next head of the Kokaki clan and also the candidate for the 6th Division captain. Being low-key and modest should be your nature. Of course, it's not wrong for a youngster like you to want to stand out. But before you gain sufficient strength, arrogance will only make people see you as ignorant. For example, you kept boastfully claiming that your Shunpo had surpassed Captain Yoryuki of the 2nd Division. Do you think that Captain Yoryuki, known as the Goddess of Flash, has inferior Shunpo compared to a rookie like you who has only trained for a few years? In this world, there may be those who can obtain in just a few days the strength that takes others hundreds of years of arduous cultivation to gain. But Byakuya, you have to know, you are not that kind of person. You may feel very powerful now, bragging about having surpassed Captain Yoryuki. But hundreds of years later when people talk about this, you may wish to stomp your feet hard enough to dig a hole the size of the entire Kokaki residence into the ground. Ever since going to Rukonga with Aelin, Jinrei Kokaki discovered that Byakuya's entire being had steadied by a lot and was no longer as impetuous as before. During this period, even when Yoryuki Shine came to provoke Byakuya, he just kept a straight face, training hard and treating the former cat demon as nothing. This made Yoryuki Shine feel extremely bored. Yo, Captain Aelin, long time no see. When seeing Aelin again, Yoryuki Shine was still as casual as ever, leaning her shoulder on him to greet him, acting as if Aelin's threat to Kisuke Urahara had never happened. Since Yoryuki Shine didn't mind, Aelin naturally wouldn't take that matter to heart either. Yeah, indeed been over half a year since we last met. You are still in your prime, Captain Yoryuki. After smilingly responding to Yoryuki, Aelin shifted his gaze to the person beside her. After half a year, Haruko Kokaki had lost some weight, but her mental condition was better than it was half a year ago. This made Aelin almost beam with joy. As expected of the most intelligent person among the Soul Reapers. Even Soul Reapers who had been hollowified could be restored by him. For a trivial soul deterioration, there definitely wouldn't be any problems as long as Kisuke Urahara was willing. From the looks of it, Kisuke Urahara's results were not bad so far. How do you feel? I feel much more relaxed than before. Having been husband and wife for 5 years, although Aelin didn't say it explicitly, Haruko Kokaki knew what he wanted to ask. It has been hard on you, Haruko. Aelin reached out and grasped Haruko Kokaki's hand in his palm. This was the first time Aelin had been so intimate with Haruko Kokaki in front of others. It made Haruko somewhat shy as she secretly glanced at Yoryuki Shine, wanting to withdraw her hand yet reluctant to part with it. Hey, I'm still here, you know. Yoryuki Shine knocked her forehead. These two, didn't they see what occasion this was? She was still around. However, Ailen's performance also let Yoriuki Shine breathe a sigh of relief in her heart. At least Ailen was not a heartless and unprincipled man. Captain Ailen, Lady Kukaki's problem is very serious. Although her condition has alleviated somewhat under Urahara's help, if the root cause is not thoroughly resolved, Lady Kukaki's situation will become more and more dangerous. Ailen's brows furrowed. That's not right. Chapter 59, Urahara's speculation. With Kisuk Urahara's abilities, completely resolving Haruko Kukaki's problem shouldn't be difficult at all. Why did Yoriuki say that Kisuk Urahara had only alleviated Haruko's condition? Even if he didn't come up with a solution in half a year, couldn't he just use the Hagyaku? Although the current Hagyaku is still only half finished, using it to treat Haruko shouldn't be an issue at all. Just what is he trying to do? Testing his standing? Thinking to hear, Ailen's heart sank. But externally, his face was calm as he asked Yoriuki, then Lady Yoriuki, did Urahara Third Seat ever say what the root cause of Haruko's problem needs to be resolved? How would I know? But don't worry, since Kisuk said so, he definitely has a way to resolve it. It's just that the method might be somewhat special and he was afraid you wouldn't agree, so he didn't use it on Lady Kukaki before you came back to confirm. After hearing Yoriuki's explanation, Ailen nodded slightly. Indeed, Kisuk Urahara was capable. However, he thought too much. If Yoriuki didn't bring it up, Ailen would have nearly forgotten that the reason Kisuk Urahara was helping stabilize Haruko Kukaki's soul deterioration was because Ailen had threatened him. If Kisuk had left some kind of contingency on Haruko Kukaki while healing her, it would be very difficult for even Ailen to detect. With himself present, no matter how bold Urahara was, he should also consider the possibility of his methods being seen through and what could happen afterwards. I understand. Then I'll have to trouble Captain Yoriuki to help arrange a time with Urahara Third Seat on my behalf. I'll bring Haruko along to listen to his solution. No problem. 3 days later, Ailen received a message from Yoriuki and bid farewell to father-in-law Jinrei Kukaki before bringing Haruko Kukaki along to follow Yoriuki to a secluded area within Seoul society. Soon, the ground before the three revealed an entrance to an underground cellar, with a spiraling staircase heading deep underground. Only now by passing through the cellar entrance did Ailen sense the weak barrier. Ailen's peripheral vision swept over Haruko. Haruko's gaze didn't contain any surprise at all, clearly indicating this wasn't her first time seeing something like this. After following Yoriuki underground, what entered Ailen's eyes was an unfamiliar yet familiar underground plaza. It could be said to be unfamiliar because this was Ailen's first time coming here. Yet it was also familiar because Ailen had seen this place before in the anime during his previous life. This was where protagonist Ichigo Kurosaki used Kisuk Urahara's Tenshintai and completed his Bankai training within a short 3 days. Contrary to what one would imagine, the spacious underground plaza was not pitch black without any light. Rather, it looked no different compared to the outside. This was also one of Urahara's inventions. The artificial sky canopy allowed the plaza ceiling to be made into a sky identical to the real one outside. If they hadn't entered from the above-ground entrance, no one would have thought this place was actually situated dozens of meters underground. Oh my, how rare! For Captain Ailen to grace my hidden base with his presence, I'm truly honored. After exchanging a look with Yoriuki, Kisuk Urahara welcomed Ailen with an obsequious smile. Urahara Third Seat, let's dispense with the pleasantries between you and I. When facing Kisuk Urahara, Ailen knew he couldn't match the intellects of schemers like him. Hence, he also didn't bother with any tricks or beating around the bush, directly asking, what exactly is the method that can completely resolve Haruko's problem? As long as you can help me resolve Haruko's soul deterioration, consider it me owing you and Captain Yoriuki a favor. Ailen. Concern flashed through Haruko Kukaki's eyes as she gripped Ailen's hand. As the person closest to Ailen, Haruko Kukaki could be considered one of the people most familiar with Ailen. Previously, she thought Lady Yoriuki and Kisuk were helping to treat her due to their past camaraderie from working together in the 2nd Division. But from Ailen and Yoriuki, Kisuk's conversation, it seemed like Ailen had paid some kind of price for them to agree to treat her. Gently patting Haruko's hand, Ailen smiled at her and said, "Don't worry, Haruko. Captain Yoriuki and Urahara are both people of the 13 divisions. Even if I end up owing them a favor, it won't impact me much. You should know that to me, you are much more important than so-called favors." Haruko Kukaki nodded slightly, but at the same time, She also secretly decided that if Kisokura asked for extremely unreasonable conditions from Ailen because of her, she would rather give up on treatment. Captain Ailen's favor? We can discuss that later. Kisokura didn't respond to Ailen. Although the exchange with Ailen half a year ago made both Kisokura and Yoryuki feel that their understanding towards Ailen had been too one-sided, it instead seemed like Ailen understood them better. One must know that in Seoul society, before Kisokura became the 12th Division captain, only Yoryuki herself knew of his scientific capabilities. Because of his inquiries towards the power of the Soul King, he had created the half-finished Hagyaku. This was a secret within secrets. After all, Kisok currently didn't completely understand the abilities of the Hagyaku he created himself. He only knew that the Hagyaku in his hands could induce hollowification in Soul Reapers, granting them a hollow's power. Kisok was certain these matters were known by no one besides Yoryuki. Yet Ailen not only knew of his research ability, but also the existence of the Hagyaku. This was extremely frightening. It seemed that if not for Haruko Kukaki's soul-developing issues, perhaps the entirety of Soul Society would still be unaware that the 13 divisions actually hid someone like Ailen. Thinking back to that overly talkative Zanpakuto who had abruptly appeared through the use of a Tenshintai not long ago, a notion flashed through Kisok's mind. Could Ailen, the person possessing the sword creation ability, have forged some kind of Zanpakuto with similar capabilities to that Zanpakuto? One that allowed him to know of Soul Society's countless secrets through its power? Just what did Ailen, this captain that emerged from their 2nd division, actually know? Fortunately, from how Ailen was willing to expose things to them for Haruko Kukaki's recovery, he shouldn't be someone evil. At the very least, Haruko Kukaki could be considered one of Ailen's weaknesses. With these racing thoughts, Kisokura clapped and said, "Captain Ailen, let me first explain my treatment plan for Lady Kukaki to give you sufficient understanding of the entire treatment process before we discuss how to treat her." Chapter 60, Treatment Plan. Captain Ailen, the reason why Lady Kukaki's soul is gradually deteriorating is because your spiritual pressure is too powerful. Lady Kukaki, who often stays by your side, cannot withstand the oppression brought by your powerful spiritual pressure. Ailen nodded. He didn't realize this at first, but after Captain Retsu Unohana of the 4th Division pointed it out, he naturally understood the reason. Upon hearing Kisokura words, Haruko Kukaki couldn't help but turn pale. She gripped Ailen's hand much tighter. As Ailen's wife, not only had she failed to properly accompany Ailen, but her own weakness was also dragging Ailen down. This was a wife's shame. Vice-captain level Soul Reapers and above who go to the human world must have their spiritual pressure sealed unless they are on special missions. I believe Captain Ailen also knows the reason for this. Powerful spiritual pressure can oppress human souls in the human world. After frequently receiving stimulation from powerful spiritual pressure, some people will awaken their own spiritual power and gain the ability to see spirits. And souls with spiritual pressure are the tastiest food in the eyes of hollows. With no means of fighting back against hollows, having spiritual power will only make humans die faster in the human world. That's why powerful Soul Reapers have their spiritual pressure limited when entering the human world. It can be considered as a protection for the humans there. Not bad, Captain Ailen understands it very thoroughly. In fact, Lady Kukaki's situation is the same as those humans who awakened their spiritual power. As Kisokura led Ailen and the others forward, he explained to Ailen, however, compared to Lady Kukaki, the human souls have a body that perfectly matches with them. So after the human souls receive damage from powerful spiritual pressure, their body will nurture and restore their soul, allowing their soul's power to break through the limit and awaken their spiritual power. For me, healing Lady Kukaki completely isn't difficult at all. But even if Lady Kukaki makes a full recovery, if she continues staying beside Captain Ailen, her soul will start deteriorating again in less than 2 years. And the speed of deterioration will become faster and faster until it exceeds my ability to treat. Ailen nodded. Just as Kisokura said, merely restoring Haruko Kukaki's soul wouldn't resolve the root issue. Unless Ailen and Haruko never met again, it would only be treating the symptoms and not the cause. So? What is Third Seat Urahara's plan to treat her? But having listened so far, Ailen already basically guessed what Kisokura was planning for Haruko Kukaki's treatment. After all, in Ailen's memories, Kisokura specialty had always been creating Jigai. More than 200 years later, after Isshin Shiba lost his Soul Reaper powers, he relied on the Jigai specially tailored for him by Kisokura. and even successfully had 3 children with Masaki Kurosaki. This showed that the Jigai Kisokura harem made for Isshin Shiba was a perfect match for Shiba Isshin, truly allowing the Soul Reaper Isshin Shiba to become the human Isshin Kurosaki. As expected, Kisokura Hara's next words confirmed Ailen's guess. Captain Ailen, my idea is for Lady Kukaki to become a human. I will specially create a prosthetic body called a Jigai that completely matches Lady Kukaki. Relying on that body to nurture Lady Kukaki's soul, after a period of time, her soul can be fully restored. But of course, as Captain Ailen knows, Jigai can only function in the human world. In other words, for Lady Kukaki to recover, she must head to the human world. And Kisokura Hara stared at Ailen, observing his expression while slowly saying, Captain Ailen, because Lady Kukaki is not a soul reaper, once she enters the Jigai, she won't be able to leave the Jigai unless she dies. Ailen's pupil shrank. Clearly, he understood the implication behind Kisokura Hara's words. After entering a Jigai perfectly tailored for her that could nurture her soul, Haruko Kukaki would no longer be a soul-only whole, but instead a human with a body that could only live in the human world. Since she would become human, naturally her soul could only leave her body after death. Kisokura Hara wanted Ailen to leave Soul Society and Seireitei. He couldn't see through Ailen and was unclear just how much Ailen knew and what choices he might make in the future. Hence, under the guise of treating Haruko Kukaki, he wanted to have Ailen stay far away from Soul Society. As long as Ailen left Soul Society, he would be unable to sense the Soul King's secrets and thus wouldn't do anything outside of Kisok's ability to handle. It wasn't that Kisokura Hara didn't trust Ailen, but this was something every person capable of sensing the Soul King's secrets had to go through. The Soul King was the cornerstone that stabilized the worlds. If even the slightest problem occurred with that cornerstone, the worlds would descend into chaos and destruction. This was why Ichibe Hyasub created the Zero Division and had them guard the Soul King Palace to protect the Soul King. Why Genryusai Shigakuni Yamamoto established the 13 Court Guard squads to safeguard Seireitei and become the first line of defense protecting the Soul King. This was the path the martial artists chose after learning of the Soul King's secrets. And the intelligent ones were all preparing contingency plans for themselves. For example, the now destroyed Great Noble Clan, the Tsunoya Shiro family. They had secretly amassed the Soul King's powers in the shadows, wanting to nurture a Soul King candidate that they could control. With the Soul King candidate under their grasp replacing the actual Soul King. Sosuke Aizen had also reached a certain stage and came into contact with the Soul King's secrets before deciding to become the Soul King himself. No one stands atop the heavens from the start. Neither you nor I, not even the gods started there. But the empty throne in the sky must have an end to its vacancy. From now on, I will stand at the top. Even Kisokura Hara was preparing for possible future crises related to the Soul King with his own choices. Like the Tsunoya Shiro, Kisokura Hara was also currently nurturing a Soul King candidate. But unlike the Tsunoya Shiro, he had no intentions of controlling the Soul King candidate. He merely hoped that the Soul King candidate he created could restore stability to the world when problems occurred with the actual Soul King. Now, Kisokura Hara was also showing his hand to Ailen. For Haruko Kukaki to recover, she must become a human in the human world. And with Haruko possessing spiritual pressure, she would definitely frequently come under attack by hollows. When that happened, Ailen would have no choice but to accompany Haruko in the human world, or choose to station Soul Reapers to constantly protect her. The two choices would decide how Kisokura Hara treated Ailen in the future. Chapter 61, Deterrence. If Ailen chooses to go to the human world with Haruko Kukaki, Kisokura Hara can let down half of his guard towards Ailen. After all, someone with emotional attachments is unlikely to walk the most extreme path, and may even protect the world for the sake of their attachments. But if Ailen merely chooses to have other Soul Reapers protect Haruko Kukaki, then Kisokura Hara must make some preparations in his heart to face Ailen in the future. Thank you Urahara and Lady Yoryuki for always taking the time to care for my illness. Just as Kisokura Hara was observing Ailen, Haruko Kukaki, who had been ignored by everyone, suddenly stood between Ailen and Kisokura Hara and smiled as she rejected Kisokura Hara's proposal. However, for me, how long I can live is not important. I am the eldest daughter of the Kukaki family. Ailen is currently the pillar of the Kukaki family. The Kukaki family can do without me, but it cannot do without Ailen. So, Lady Yoryuki, I understand your kind intentions. Ailen, let's go back. Then, Haruko Kukaki turned around and pulled Ailen's hand, wanting to go back. As Ailen's wife, she would not let her husband do anything against his own will for her sake, nor did she want any problems to arise between her and Ailen. Haruko Kukaki dared not imagine what she would think in her heart if Ailen accepted this treatment plan but did not accompany her to the human world. Would she still love Ailen as much as before? At the same time, as the eldest daughter of the Kukaki family, Haruko Kukaki also knew that her father was already old in age, and her nephew Byakuya Kukaki had yet to grow up. If Ailen chose to go to the human world with her at this time, it was very likely that the Kukaki family would decline. Haruko Kukaki had already accepted and chosen her own fate 3 years ago. Now, with Kisuke Urahara's help, her soul had recovered a bit, allowing her to accompany Ailen for a while longer. Haruko Kukaki was already very content. However, Haruko Kukaki did not manage to pull Ailen along. The reason Ailen did not respond just now was not because he did not want to go to the human world with Haruko Kukaki, but because Ailen was considering where in the human world they should settle down. The current human world was still ancient. Let alone modern amenities, even decent roads were few and far between. What Ailen was familiar with was the modern lifestyle from over 200 years later. For both him and Haruko Kukaki, life in the ancient human world would not be a simple matter. But fortunately, Ailen was not completely without connections in the human world. If Ailen remembered correctly, that Quincy, Tsunishita, who he had put under Soul Reaper surveillance, was still alive 200 years later. Moreover, that place was an area with high spiritual concentration 200 years later, and was also the stage where various characters appeared. If they really had to live in the human world, becoming neighbors with Tsunishita wouldn't be a bad choice. Ailen just didn't expect that after he sank into thought for a moment, Haruko Kukaki would have already rejected Kisuke Urahara's good intentions on his behalf. Haruko, wait a minute. Ailen exerted some strength to pull the Haruko Kukaki who wanted to leave back to his side. He then turned to Kisuke Urahara and said, Urahara, how long will you need to make Haruko's Jigai? In Ailen's heart, he never had any thoughts of not saving Haruko Kukaki. Otherwise, why would he, after finding out about Haruko Kukaki's condition, stop making Zanpakuto to enhance his spiritual pressure just so Haruko would be oppressed less? As for going to the human world with Haruko Kukaki, Ailen thought it was even better. As long as Haruko Kukaki's soul had a body to nourish it, then Ailen could continue to materialize all the Zanpakuto he had copied and also produce the powerful weapons from other worlds based on their abilities. As for the Kukaki family that Haruko mentioned, Ailen wasn't worried either. Even without Ailen, the Kukaki family in that world didn't decline. Byakuya Kukaki took over the Kukaki family's responsibilities very well, upholding the Kukaki family's glory. Now, Ailen was only going to the human world, he wasn't dead. The deterrence brought by a captain-class power could prevent many nobles coveting the Kukaki family from being too unscrupulous. Oh! Upon hearing Ailen's reply, Kisuke Urahara looked at Ailen in surprise. It seemed that Captain Ailen might even become a helper on his side. If I start making it now, it will take at most 3 months to complete. Alright, I'll come to trouble you again after 3 months. I just hope that Haruko's Jigai is merely a Jigai. I don't want there to be anything extra added inside it. Otherwise, I'm afraid that even Captain Yuriuki and Urahara won't be able to withstand my wrath. After speaking, Ailen deeply glanced at Kisuke Urahara and Yuriuki Shihoan before taking Haruko away, vanishing instantly before the two's eyes. A few seconds after Ailen left, Kisuke Urahara scratched his messy hair. Oh my, listening to Captain Ailen's last words, it was as if I would add something shady inside Lady Kukaki's Jigai. How could that be? Would you? Yuriuki asked with her arms crossed. Her usually smiling face revealed an unusually stern expression. Kisuke Urahara put his hand down from scratching his head and stopped joking around. I did have that thought before. After all, this guy is too mysterious. He spent 35 years in the 2nd Division. For most of that time, he stayed in the barracks. The only one he had a relatively close relationship with was his former squad leader of the detention unit, Kyuta Aokiji. Although people healed by him in the detention unit wanted to get closer after seeing his superb healing abilities, their efforts were largely fruitless. Even after he defeated Vice Captain Marino Shinmada to become the 2nd Division's Vice Captain 5 years ago, nothing changed. It was only through a casual chat with Shaolin Fon that I found out he only started going out after learning he could as long as he arrived at the training grounds before the emergency assembly bell stopped ringing. Only then did he begin leaving the 2nd Division and frequenting bars. After that, he met the eldest daughter of the Kukaki family, fought with Koga of the 1st Division, eventually became the Kukaki family's son-in-law and the captain of the 6th Division. If he wasn't so concerned about Lady Kukaki. Speaking to here, Kisuk Urahara shook his head and glanced at Yoryuki Shihoan. How could he not be the same? What would he have become if not for Yoryuki after finding out the Soul King's secrets? That's right, Kisuk. So you'd better not carry out those thoughts of yours. Yoryuki looked seriously at Kisuk Urahara. You saw how he left just now too, right? Other than verbal threats, his actions were also deterring us. Even with someone in tow, his speed exceeded what I could sense with my spiritual pressure. In other words, his shunpo surpasses mine. Chapter 62, Bankai Unlimited Blade Works. When Yoryuki Shihoan said surpasses mine, her expression was very rich. There was some disappointment, but more so, it was the aura of soaring fighting spirit. Goddess of Flash Yoryuki, this was not her self-proclaimed title, but one bestowed upon her by enemies after countless battles. It could be said that in terms of Flash Step, Yoryuki Shihoan represented the pinnacle of Soul Society. But now, Yoryuki Shihoan discovered that the Flash Step of her former vice-captain was actually still above hers. This sparked the pride within Yoryuki's heart. Although Goddess of Flash wasn't a title she called herself, she did not wish to just hand over a title that belonged to her so easily either. She, Yoryuki Shihoan, would never be inferior to anyone. Of course, before that, she still had to make things clear with her childhood friend. Judging purely from Flash Step, if either of us were to face him, we would only be in a passive position, extremely disadvantageous for us. Of course, if you wish to give it a try, I don't mind. I know. Kisuk Urahara nodded. From Ailen's performance, Kisuk Urahara tentatively categorized him into the same group of people as himself for the time being. Just thinking of what he would do if any harm came to Yoryuki, Kisuk Urahara could easily imagine that if he really did anything shady with Haruko Kukaki's Jigai, Ailen would definitely make a move against him and Yoryuki. And it would be a fight to the death. Of course, their conversation was also to demonstrate their stance to Ailen to some degree. After all, it wasn't long ago that he learned of a certain captain's abilities from the mouth of that strange Zanpakuto that had possessed the dummy body. If Ailen had also created a Zanpakuto with similar capabilities, then a conversation like this would help put Ailen's mind at ease. Don't worry, I wouldn't risk our lives to provoke someone who might stand on the same side as us. Ailen-kun. Haruko Kukaki raised her head to look at Ailen's profile, her heart filled with endless warmth. Don't worry, Haruko. Hearing Haruko Kukaki's voice, Ailen thought she was worried about the situation with the Kukaki family after they left. So he smiled and said, I'm only going with you to the human world for your treatment, it's not like I died. If the Kukaki family encounters any problems, you can contact us in the human world. I can return through the Kukaki family's Senkaimon at any time. Although Haruko Kukaki had misunderstood his intentions, she did not explain and only hugged Ailen tightly. After returning to the Kukaki family with Haruko Kukaki and getting her settled, Ailen headed towards the backyard. You've returned. So how is it? As Haruko Kukaki's father, how could Jinrei Kukaki not care about his daughter's condition? He had been prepared to face his daughter's death once more. But over this past half-year, the changes in Haruko Kukaki also birthed some hope in Jinrei's heart. Third Seat Urahara said that to completely resolve Haruko's issues, Haruko has to enter a Jigai that perfectly matches her soul and become human. Letting the flesh nourish the soul. Next, Ailen relayed Kisuk Urahara's treatment plan he arranged for Haruko Kukaki to Jinrei, putting Jinrei's mind at ease. However, father-in-law, after Haruko becomes human, her soul can only leave her body after death before she can return to Soul Society. With Haruko's spiritual pressure, it's very easy for her to come under hollow attacks while living in the human world. So after Third Seat Urahara completes Haruko's Jigai, I will accompany her to the human world. The Kukaki family and 6th Division. Jinrei Kukaki fell silent. There was no denying that whether the Kukaki family had Ailen or not in the next few hundred years would determine whether they could steadily remain as one of the 5 great noble clans of Soul Society, bringing the Kukaki family to true heights. But now, he had to weigh between family and daughter. After a period of silence, Jinrei Kukaki let out a sigh. Let it be then. Without Ailen, relying solely on himself to introduce Koga into the Kukaki family in this generation, the Kukaki family might suffer great calamity instead. Thinking so, Jinrei Kokaki nodded at Ailen, go on then. I haven't died yet. Neither the 6th division nor the Kokaki family will fall into chaos. Hearing Jinrei say so, Ailen also heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. Although Ailen would have brought Haruko Kokaki to the human world regardless of whether Jinrei agreed or not. Not only was it to treat Haruko Kokaki, it was also to continue raising his own strength. But Jinrei Kokaki's attitude would directly impact Haruko Kokaki's state of mind. If possible, Ailen did not wish for Haruko Kokaki to have any mental burdens. Father-in-law, it will take 3 months for Haruko's Jigai to be completed. So accompany Haruko more over the next 3 months. As for Byakuya, since I cannot shield him from the wind and rain as his uncle before leaving, I'll guide Byakuya for a period of time first, so he can grow faster. Very well, then Byakuya will be in your hands this period, Ailen. Jinrei glanced at Byakuya practicing by himself, then nodded and left. For Soul Reapers, battle was indispensable. His own strength could no longer support supervising Byakuya's sword and unarmed combat training. With Ailen taking over, things couldn't be better. Hey? Uncle, you're here. Only after Byakuya Kokaki completed his sword training did he notice his grandfather watching him practice had been replaced by Uncle Ailen. Haha, father-in-law had matters to attend to and left, letting me take over training you for 3 months. What's wrong, aren't you welcoming me? Of course not. Byakuya Kokaki hurriedly shook his head. Ever since witnessing Uncle Ailen's Zanjutsu, Hakuda, Ho, and Kid, admiration towards Ailen in Byakuya's heart already surpassed that for his own grandfather. It was just a pity that after that day, Uncle Ailen had been busy with 6th Division matters. Byakuya Kokaki couldn't find an opportunity to ask Ailen for guidance. Now that Ailen directly said he would guide Byakuya for 3 months, how could he not welcome it? I'm just too pleasantly surprised. Hehe, Byakuya. My training methods for you are different from your grandfather's. I just hope that after today, this surprise doesn't become a fright for you. After speaking, Ailen recited his Zanpakuto's release chant towards Byakuya. This body is naturally born for the sword. Blood like steel, resolute and unyielding, heart like glass, fragile and delicate. Crossing countless battlefields, never defeated, yet never understood. So I stand atop the hill of swords, intoxicated by victory. Throughout my life, it is meaningless. As he chanted, a massive spiritual pressure surged from his body. This spiritual pressure almost pierced the sky, breaking through the clouds above the Kokaki's residence, spreading out in rings in all directions. Bankai Unlimited Blade Works. Chapter 63, Battle. Who dares to violate the commander's ban in Shirai and release their Zanpakutos Bankai? Ailen's spiritual pressure soared into the sky. Almost everyone in Shirai could feel Ailen's vast and majestic spiritual pressure. In an instant, all the Soul Reapers in Shirai turned their gazes towards the Kokaki family's direction. How could they have imagined that in less than 6 years since the rebellion incident where someone violated the commander's ban, there would be another Soul Reaper violating Commander Yamamoto's ban and releasing their Zanpakuto in Shirai? How bold, not afraid that violating the commander's ban repeatedly would incur Commander Yamamoto's great wrath. Oh? This spiritual pressure, it's Captain Ailen. The location is at the Kokaki family too, what's happening? The captains guarding Shirai immediately recognized Ailen's identity upon sensing this immense Ryutsu. After all, over 5 years ago, it was Ailen who defeated the traitor Koga, saving Shirai from a great disaster. It was just everyone's first time sensing Ailen's full power spiritual pressure. Oh my, I didn't expect that Captain Ailen had reached such a level. In the 8th Division, Shunsui Kiraku secretly took a sip of alcohol behind his vice-captain Lisa Yudmaru's back and sighed in surprise. It's just strange, no one's fighting Captain Ailen, so why would he suddenly release his Zanpakuto? Aside from Shunsui Kiraku, Jaishur Yukatake in the 13th Division also raised his head in surprise. In his childhood, Jaishur Yukatake had suffered from a serious illness, nearly dying. As a minor noble family, the Yukatake family also knew about the Soul King being torn apart by the ancestors of the 5 great noble families. Hence they coincidentally found out about the whereabouts of the fragmentation that became Mimi Heiji after the Soul King's right arm turned into the demigod of the right arm. In order to save Jaishur Yukatake, his parents secretly brought him before Mimi Heiji. Afterwards, Jaishur Yukatake's lungs were offered as a sacrifice and he became the right arm of the Soul King, allowing him to survive. Through the right arm of the Soul King, Jaishur Yukatake could obtain some visions of the future seen by the Soul King. This ability was called Divine Possession by Jaishur Yukatake. However, at this moment, Jaishur Yukatake also had some doubts on his face. When Siritai was facing its greatest crisis, Jaishur did not see Ailin's figure in his visions. At that time, he assumed it was because Ailin's strength was insufficient and had stepped down from his position as the 6th Division captain after Byakuya Kukaki grew up. But from Ailin's erupting spiritual pressure right now, although Ailin's spiritual pressure might be slightly weaker compared to himself and Shunsui Kirikou, it wasn't too big a gap. How could someone so powerful be invisible during that great battle? He would have to investigate later to see if Ailin was being punished for violating the commander's ban this time, causing him to be absent from the battlefield. Otherwise, with Captain Ailin demonstrating such power presently, if he harbored any resentment towards Siritai, he would become a huge threat. Bankai Unlimited Blade Works. Accompanying Ailin's final chant, his true Bankai appeared in the Soul Reaper world for the first time. The endless barren land, fiery red sky, as well as the gigantic rotating gears acting as space partition. Countless Zanpakut were stabbed into the ground. The hilts of all the Zanpakut were slightly tilted towards the Sword Hill, seemingly paying homage to the emperor residing upon the hill. There were also sparsely scattered Zanpakut stabbed atop the Sword Hill. These Zanpakut seemed to form steps, adding some layering to this tall and independent hill. Everything demonstrated to Byakuya Kukaki that the space he was currently in was no longer Siritai. Byakuya Kukaki raised his head to look at the master of this space. At the highest point on the hill stood a lonely figure. The crimson ceremonial kimono fluttered in the wind. Beneath the white captain's haori he wore was not the black shiakush, but a red holy shroud. Byakuya Kukaki stared blankly. The powerful spiritual pressure emanating from Uncle Ailin made him feel like even breathing was difficult. His body seemed to have gained a will of its own, resisting his control. Gulp. Byakuya Kukaki uncontrollably swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Big beads of cold sweat rolled down his forehead. He did not understand why Uncle Ailin was using his Bankai to train him. This is my world. Standing atop the hill, Ailin spread open his arms and embraced his world for the first time. Unlimited Blade Works. This was Ailin's biggest secret in the Soul Reaper world besides himself. According to Ailin's past thinking, this reality marble was absolutely not something he could reveal to others. Anyone who forced Ailin to use this move would either die or perish. However, because of Haruko Kukaki, Ailin would remain in Soul Society for at most another 3 months. Revealing some things wasn't an issue. Moreover, all he revealed was his spiritual pressure. The existence of Unlimited Blade Works was only known by Byakuya. Of course, Ailin only wanted to use this space to train Byakuya. He did not plan on explaining anything regarding his reality marble's abilities to Byakuya. Byakuya, do you know of my Zanpakutos abilities? After venting his emotions for a bit, Ailin lowered his arms and turned to look at Byakuya Kukaki below the hill. I heard from grandfather that uncle's Zanpakut ability is sword creation. Correct. My Zanpakutos ability is crafting swords. This space is where I forge swords. It is also where I store the swords I've crafted. All the swords within this space were made by me. I have absolute control over the swords I've forged. After speaking, Ailin snapped his fingers. Whoosh! Whoosh! In an instant, all the Zanpakut in the space aside from those on the hill floated up from the ground. They circled in the air in neat rows, surrounding Byakuya Kukaki in the middle. This scene was somewhat similar to Byakuya's future move Senbonzakura Kage Yoshi. Even Byakuya Kukaki felt some unease being surrounded by so many swords. His eyes darted left and right. Shuo! The next moment, Ailin's figure flickered as he appeared inside the arena formed from thousands of swords after descending from the sword hill. Byakuya, I've told you before that I hope you don't turn this surprise I have for training you into fright too quickly. I only have 3 months to train you. To allow you to gain the most from it, my training for you only has 1 item battle. Ailin reached out and one of the Zanpakut comprising the arena directly flew over into his hand from its position. Here, I will keep my spiritual pressure, strength and speed all at a similar level to yours. Draw your sword, Byakuya. Chapter 64, Fearing Death. Clang. Hearing Ailin's words, Byakuya Kukaki reflexively drew out his Zanpakut from his waist, gripping the hilt tightly with both hands, the blade pointing towards Ailin. Very good, Byakuya. You must remember, once you've drawn your sword, you must be prepared to kill your enemy and be killed by your enemy. Now, are you prepared to kill me, or be killed by me? What? Byakuya Kokaki's pupils suddenly contracted. Because Ailen's voice came from behind him. Swish swish. The next moment, Byakuya Kokaki only felt a chill on his chest and abdomen. Large amounts of blood gushed out from the two wounds. Pfft! Byakuya Kokaki spit out a mouthful of blood. Feeling that all his strength was draining away with the flow of blood, he could no longer support his body and collapsed to the ground. Flash Blossom. This is a move where one circles behind the enemy using Shunpo, destroying the enemy's soul sleep and chain of fate. With your current strength, even if I suppress my own spiritual pressure, strength, and speed to be on par with yours, you probably can't even see my movements. Walking to the front of Byakuya Kokaki, Ailen waved his hand, flicking the blood on the Zanpakuto to splash in an arc on the ground. Byakuya Kokaki's eyes were wide open as he looked at Ailen, full of incredulity. He never expected that Uncle Ailen would actually make a move to kill him. Uncle, why? Byakuya Kokaki breathed heavily, forcefully suppressing the fear of death as he asked Ailen why he wanted to kill him. Didn't I tell you earlier? Byakuya. Once you've drawn your sword, you must be prepared to kill the enemy, or be killed by the enemy. This is the first lesson I'm teaching you. If you don't even have the resolve to kill the enemy, how can your sword harm the enemy? If you don't even have the resolve to be killed by the enemy, what right do you have to take the enemy's life? Battle is a means of survival where both sides stake their lives. Only by placing both sides equally on the scales can one decide their own or the enemy's fate. Seeing that the light in Byakuya Kokaki's eyes had become blurred, Ailen waved his hand and a new Zanpakuto flew out from the sword array into his left hand. Then, Ailen recited the release chant for this Zanpakuto. Fall in love with him, void bandages. Then, the Zanpakuto in Ailen's hand emitted a dazzling white glow. This white glow spread like ribbons, eventually transforming into a long white bandage. There was a circular bulge at regular intervals on this white bandage. This weapon was made by Ailen based on the abilities of 4th Division Captain Retsuo Anohana's Zanpakuto Minajiki. Its original form was the void weapon of Hair Menjo from Guilty Crowns. Looking at the white bandage floating in midair, Ailen couldn't help letting out a sigh. That gentle and kind girl, how many people grieved for her back then. Even in her final moments of death, she was still over 10 centimeters away from touching her crush, Shu. Even the funeral parlor had many defectors at that moment. As Ailen's thoughts moved, the bandage danced over to Byakuya Kokaki's side, circling around him over and over. Under the power of the void bandages, Byakuya Kokaki's entire person floated in mid-air. The circular bulges on the void bandages lit up with blue glows one by one. Under the illumination from these blue lights, Byakuya Kokaki's injuries swiftly recovered. The ability of the void bandages was to restore damaged objects back to their original state. These objects naturally included humans. This ability was somewhat similar in effect to Oriuminu's Stankishun in Bleach. However, Oriuminu's ability was the rejection of things, while the void bandages ability was the restoration of things. Very quickly, the heavily injured and dying Byakuya Kokaki fully recovered under the power of the void bandages. Ailen waved his hand and the void bandages flew into the sky, floating above the two. Bang! Losing the support of the void bandages, Byakuya Kokaki plunged down from mid-air, falling onto the ground. Feeling his completely recovered body, Byakuya was filled with bewilderment. If not for the large amounts of still wet bloodstains remaining on his shiakusho, he wouldn't have dared to believe that he was on the verge of death just seconds ago. Stand up, Byakuya. Hearing Ailen's voice, Byakuya Kokaki's body shuddered reflexively before he woke up from his earlier surreal feeling. He was still in battle against Uncle Ailen. Gripping his Zanpakuto tightly, Byakuya focused his gaze on Ailen. Not bad. After receiving such pain just now, you still dare to point your blade at me. I must commend you for this, Byakuya. Seeing Byakuya's performance, Ailen nodded in satisfaction and pointed to the void bandages floating above them, saying to Byakuya, don't worry, that sword from earlier has recovery abilities. As long as you are not killed by me in one blow, she can restore your condition completely. So in our battle later, you must pay attention at all times, to not be killed by me. Otherwise, she does not have the ability to revive the dead. But rest assured. Since this is training for you after all, I won't defeat you in one blow like before. Instead, I'll slowly apply pressure on you bit by bit to bring out your full potential. Ailen's voice was not loud, gentle like a spring breeze. But landing in Byakuya's ears, it was like spring thunder, blasting his eardrums. Whoosh! With a stomp of his feet, Aelin charged towards Byakuya Kokaki. Clang! Byakuya swung his sword with both hands to block Aelin's attack. Not bad. No panicking in battle, worthy of praise. But when I do this, how will you respond with both your hands gripping your sword like that? Aelin was displaying a strength similar to Byakuya's, so when their blades clashed, Byakuya occupied the advantage and pressed his sword down against Aelin's. But despite gaining the upper hand in strength, Byakuya Kokaki's eyes did not show any smugness, only filled with horror. Because Aelin's free left hand slowly raised up, extending a finger to point at Byakuya Kokaki's forehead. Then under Byakuya's terrified gaze, Aelin's finger slowly moved down before finally pointing at Byakuya Kokaki's right arm. Had number 4 Byakurai. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. Boom. Chapter 65, Aelin's Special Training. As Aelin chanted, a streak of lightning flashed from the tip of his left-hand finger, piercing through Byakuya Kokaki's right arm amidst his terrified gaze. Ah! Byakuya Kokaki let out a miserable shriek as his right arm was injured. With his strength on the sword reduced, he was now suppressed by Aelin instead. Clang! Aelin exerted force with his right hand and directly slashed Byakuya Kokaki away. Bang! Byakuya Kokaki tumbled on the ground several times before climbing back up. Before he could adjust his balance, Aelin's attack caught up. Clink! Clink! Clink clink! Sparks flew everywhere. Under Aelin's fierce barrage of attacks, Byakuya Kokaki was like a football, sent rolling everywhere after being slashed. Weak, weak, weak. Too weak, Byakuya. Byakuya Kokaki blocked Aelin's sword with his own. With his right hand injured, he could only grip the sword with his left hand, greatly reducing his strength. His sword was directly split apart by Aelin before being kicked away. Where's your Hakuta? Where's your Shunpo? Where's your kid? A Soul Reaper's battle isn't just a swordsmanship battle. Your arm is currently injured and your swordsmanship is inferior to mine. What you need to do is utilize all your power to confront me, not just rely on that inferior swordsmanship to take a beating. Although he had been taking a beating all this while, Byakuya had apparently taken Aelin's words to heart. Hence, the next time after being blasted away by Aelin, facing Aelin's assault, Byakuya Kokaki did not use his sword to block for the first time. Instead, he utilized the defensive kid. Bakud number 8, Seiki. Clang. Boom. Under Jinrei Kokaki's guidance, Byakuya's cultivation had always focused mainly on swordsmanship. He only had a slight understanding towards Kid. Deploying the hastily used 8th binding spell, he was naturally unable to block Aelin's attack at all. It was directly shattered through before he was slashed apart. But this bit of time was sufficient for Byakuya Kokaki to adjust his stance. Wielding his sword with his left hand and releasing low-level Kid spells with his right, he entangled with Aelin. Had number 1, Thrust. Bakud number 4, Hainawa. Initially, by combining his swordsmanship and Kid, Byakuya Kokaki barely managed to withstand Aelin for a period. But as Aelin gradually raised his swordsmanship proficiency, Byakuya Kokaki was once again heavily injured by him. Blue lights shone within the arena formed from Aelin's sword construction. Every instance of the blue light represented Byakuya Kokaki undergoing yet another brush with death after suffering heavy injuries. And in the intervals between these blue lights were Aelin's repeated rebukes towards Byakuya Kokaki. Are you an idiot? Didn't I tell you long ago why Shunpo is considered alongside Zanjutsu, Hakuta, and Kid as the 4 techniques of Soul Reapers? It's because only Shunpo can perfectly avoid the attacks from Zanjutsu, Hakuta, and Kid. Weak, too weak Byakuya. I'm not even using any strength yet you've already collapsed. Moron, when speed surpasses what the eyes can capture, what are you doing? Can turning your head help your eyes capture my figure? A Soul Reaper's battle is a Ryutsu battle. Use your Ryutsu to sense my movements. What's wrong? You just learned how to use Shunpo to avoid attacks, don't tell me you think Shunpo only has that one usage of dodging attacks. Flash Blossom. Whoosh. Kid usage isn't the higher the number the better, but the more practical the better. Bakud number 26, Kyoko. Tisk. Not bad Byakuya, you're starting to resemble a Soul Reaper now. Your swordsmanship can freely utilize Shunpo as well. More importantly, you've learned to use Ryutsu to sense my attacks. Your application towards Ryutsu has also risen by a level. Using Ryutsu to enhance your strength, speed, and defense has also improved over before. But sometimes, Ryutsu's sensing can also mislead you. At those times, the only thing you can trust is your own will to survive your instincts. The 3 months could be considered a nightmare for Byakuya Kokaki. Every morning after getting out of bed, he would be pulled by Ailen into the reality marble for battles after battles aside from training. After undergoing such intense battles, Byakuya's strength rose tremendously. In early of the 3rd month, Byakuya Kokaki had shockingly already completed his Zanpakutos initial release. Of course, although he completed his Zanpakutos first stage release, Byakuya still had not utilized it in his battles against Ailen. He wanted to give Ailen a surprise during their final day. Unfortunately, Byakuya Kokaki was unaware that on the very day he completed his Zanpakutos release, Ailen had already seen through it. Not only that, Ailen had even produced Senbonzakura and stabbed it atop his sword hill. Ailen had even crafted 2 weapons similar to Senbonzakura's traits based on its characteristics. Clang! 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 Within the arena formed from thousands of Zanpakut, 2 silhouettes moved as swift as the wind. The sparks produced from the clashing of blades shone brightly around the perimeter of the arena. Bakud number 4, Hainawa. Had number 9, Ran. Had number 33, Skatsui. Bakud number 39, Inkosen. The lights from destructive and binding spells interweaved. Explosions burst out large amounts of smoke and dust. Byakuya, among ordinary soul reapers, your strength can be considered top-notch. After the defense of Inkosen dispersed, Ailen walked out from within the smoke and fire. Your kid utilization is also extremely proficient. Your Shunpo has also reached a level where it can coordinate seamlessly with the other 3 Soul Reaper techniques. It can be said that if you don't release your Zanpakut, your strength could allow you to easily obtain a seated position among the Godii. Humph! On the opposite side of Ailen, Byakuya Kokaki panted heavily. But hearing Ailen's evaluation of him, the corners of his mouth couldn't help curving up slightly. Of course, for appearance sake, he still had to let out a cold humph, indicating his disdain towards Ailen's praise. However, before he could maintain this expression for even a second, Ailen's next words completely broke his composure. Judging from this, the first phase of training can be considered as you passing. So Byakuya, are you willing to accept the second phase of my training? What? Byakuya Kokaki's eyes nearly popped out from their sockets. Was he kidding? The thousands of brushes against death over the past 2 months were merely the first phase of training? Seemingly seeing through Byakuya's thoughts, Ailen laughed. Byakuya, I said earlier that with your current level, your strength isn't bad among ordinary soul reapers. If you're satisfied with your current achievements, I can end my guidance over you. Tell me now, Byakuya. Are you satisfied with just being an ordinary soul reaper? Chapter 66, the second phase. Ordinary, soul reaper. That's right, an ordinary soul reaper. Ailen walked step by step towards Byakuya Kokaki, the Zanpakut in his hand dragging on the floor, producing swish 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 scraping sounds. After over 2 months of battles between life and death, you've basically completely digested the foundations you'd built up over the past 10+ years. From now on, no matter how much I raise my strength to pressure you, the benefits to you will be very limited. Zanjutsu, Hakuda, Ho, Kid, Zanpakut, these constitute a soul reaper's strength. For the first phase, you've done very well in cultivating the 4 soul reaper techniques, laying down a solid foundation for your future stronger self. Foundation. Byakuya Kokaki pursed his lips. The struggles he experienced between life and death over the past 2 months were merely the foundation? This was the first time Byakuya Kokaki realized the difference in perspective between himself and Uncle Ailen. However, seeing Byakuya's expression, Ailen misunderstood and thought Byakuya felt that he hadn't taught him anything more powerful. Hence, Ailen knocked on his own head and explained to him. Byakuya, under normal circumstances, for ordinary soul reapers, when we cultivate one of the techniques to a certain level, we recognize that they possess captain class strength. For instance, casually slicing apart mountains with swordsmanship, blasting down high-rise buildings with Hakuda, dodging all attacks with Shunpo, casting had spells above number 80 without incantation while retaining over half of its might, raising one's Zanpakut to Bankai. As long as one can accomplish one of these, we can recognize that this person possesses captain class strength. Among these, no matter if it's Zanjutsu, Shunpo, Hakuda, or Kid, wanting to raise any of them to a captain class level has tremendous difficulty. One would need talent, perceptiveness, as well as several hundred to over 1,000 years of hard work before reaching such a realm. Byakuya Kokaki secretly rolled his eyes in his heart. If Byakuya remembered correctly, the last time Uncle Alan brought him to the Rukanga to demonstrate the might of the Soul Reaper techniques, he sliced apart mountains with a swing of his sword, traversed thousands of meters in an instant with Shunpo, blasted apart high-level defensive kid spells, and fired off a level 88 destructive spell. All of which corresponded to the captain class level Uncle Alan spoke of. Uncle Alan looked to only be in his 50s. To accomplish in a few short decades what others needed several hundred to over 1,000 years of hard work, was Uncle Alan boasting about himself? In comparison, utilizing Shinzen to give birth to one's Zanpakuto and complete its initial release is much simpler. Of course, no matter if it was Alan or Byakuya Kokaki, they both knew that this simplicity was still relative. The Soul Society had existed for tens of millions of years. In its near 2,000 years since Captain Commander Genrisai Ishigakuni Yamamoto founded the Godi I-13, even if one counted the number of powerful figures who reached a captain class level, it wouldn't break 100. Among the captains of the 13 divisions, some belonged to the group who only cultivated their Zanpakuto to Bankai. Captains like RJR Torabashi of the 3rd Division, Shinji Hirako of the 5th Division, Love Akawa of the 7th Division, Kensei Maguruma of the 9th Division, Ishin Shiba of the 10th Division, they're all this kind of people. They rely heavily on their Zanpakuto for their strength. Once they encounter opponents with abilities that counter their Zanpakuto, the probability of them losing is very big. Byakuya Kokaki was somewhat puzzled. These were the captains of the 13 divisions, standing at the apex of the Siraidi's might. But from Uncle Alan's tone, Byakuya could still feel that Uncle Alan looked down quite a bit on the people he just mentioned. However, listening to Alan evaluate these captains, Byakuya Kokaki actually felt that Uncle Alan made sense. Perhaps for the people singled out by Uncle Alan, Bankai represented the greatest boost to their strength from their Zanpakuto's abilities. But for Byakuya, who had the 4 Soul Reaper techniques cultivated to a certain level under Uncle Alan, the greatest boost Bankai brought to him was probably the 5 to 10 times increase in Ryutsu. The might of high-level kid or powerful Zanjutsu, Hakuta, need not lose out to the destructive power after Zanpakuto Bankai. Tremendous Ryutsu coupled with formidable Soul Reaper techniques could let a Soul Reaper's strength rise to a truly horrifying degree. It was hardly an exaggeration to say it was double the strength. Byakuya, don't think that you didn't learn anything from me over the past 2 months with countless battles between life and death. You've already integrated the 4 Soul Reaper techniques into your instincts, laying down the foundation for you to raise the 4 Soul Reaper techniques to captain class in the future. Throughout Siraidi's history, all who cultivated the 4 Soul Reaper techniques to captain class could complete their Zanpakuto's Bankai. However, for captain class Soul Reapers who only completed their Zanpakuto's Bankai, nearly none could cultivate the 4 Soul Reaper techniques to captain class. Do you know why this is so? Why? Alan flicked the Zanpakuto in his hand with a finger. Byakuya, to complete Zanpakuto Bankai requires materializing one's Zanpakuto before making it submit to yourself. For Soul Reapers possessing captain class Soul Reaper techniques, completing Zanpakuto Bankai isn't difficult at all. And those Soul Reapers who went through trials and tribulations to complete Bankai, upon suddenly gaining tremendous power, would only seek to unlock more of their Zanpakuto's potential. Few would quietly devote themselves towards cultivating the Soul Reaper techniques. This is an issue with mindset. Of course, mixed among them are also those whose talents are lacking, unable to make much progress despite cultivating the Soul Reaper techniques for hundreds of years. I understand now. Byakuya Kokaki nodded. What about the training for the second phase, Uncle Alan? Oh? Didn't I say so earlier? A Soul Reaper's strength consists of the combination of Zanjutsu, Shunpo, Hakuta, Kid, and their Zanpakuto. The first phase was the training of an ordinary Soul Reaper, fusing the 4 Soul Reaper techniques into your instincts. Then the second phase is naturally developing and utilizing your Zanpakuto's abilities. Developing and utilizing my Zanpakuto's abilities. Byakuya Kokaki looked doubtfully at Alan. If he remembered correctly, Uncle Alan had intentionally or unintentionally instilled the notion that the 4 Soul Reaper techniques were superior to Zanpakuto on many occasions over the grueling 2 months of training. Why was he saying to train his Zanpakuto's abilities now? Slap. Feeling that Byakuya Kokaki's gaze towards him lacked some respect, Alan directly gave him a slap. What rude thoughts are you thinking, you brat? As a Soul Reaper's weapon, birthed from the Soul Reaper's soul, the Zanpakuto is equal to the Soul Reaper's other half. If the 4 Soul Reaper techniques represent a Soul Reaper's baseline, then the Zanpakuto represents the Soul Reaper's limits. Chapter 67, Zanpakutos Misunderstanding. Lower limit? Upper limit? Byakuya Kokaki murmured to himself. Although this was the first time he had heard these two terms, based on what Uncle Alan said, Byakuya Kokaki quickly understood their meaning. The so-called lower limit should be the minimum strength he could exert. On the contrary, the upper limit was the strongest power he could exert. In other words, the 4 Soul Reaper techniques allowed him to have no weaknesses, while his Zanpakutos abilities elevated certain aspects of his strength. Uncle, I'm willing to accept your second phase of training. Just what is Captain Kokaki up to? This was the biggest doubt in most Soul Reapers' minds over the past 2 months. Every day, they could feel Captain Alan's enormous spiritual pressure from the 6th Division. There was a ban in place across Shirai prohibiting captains from releasing their Zanpakuto. Keiga was a precedent they dared not forget. Yet Captain Alan had released his Bankai in Shirai for over 2 consecutive months without any reaction from Captain Commander Yamamoto. This made everyone very puzzled. Just what was it that made Captain Commander Yamamoto turn a blind eye to Alan releasing his Zanpakuto? They didn't know that the main reason Captain Commander Yamamoto tolerated Alan releasing his Bankai in Shirai was because Jinrei Kokaki and Captain Commander Yamamoto had an agreement. In 3 months, Alan would leave Soul Society for the human world. By then, Captain Commander Yamamoto could use Alan's multiple violations of the ban as grounds to strip him of his captain position, banish him from Soul Society and bolster his own prestige. The second, and more important reason, was that the main purpose behind Captain Commander Yamamoto prohibiting the captains from fully releasing their Zanpakuto was to prevent massive damage to Shirai from their Bankai's power. From his observations over this period, Alan's Bankai only erupted with spiritual pressure during its release without causing any damage to Soul Society afterwards. Hence, Captain Commander Yamamoto agreed to Jinrei Kokaki's request and tolerated Alan releasing his Bankai in Shirai for 3 months. If Alan's Bankai could inflict terrible damage on Shirai, Captain Commander Yamamoto would have already taken action against Alan after the first time he released it. Within Unlimited Blade Works, thousands of Zanpakuto hovered in the air, surrounding Alan and Byakuya Kokaki. Byakuya, I'm very gratified that you managed to complete the first phase of training within 3 months and also unlocked your Zanpakuto's initial release during this period. If you hadn't accomplished either one of these points, I wouldn't have opened the second phase of training for you. Before commencing the second phase of training, Byakuya, you must always bear this sentence in mind. Staring into Byakuya's eyes, Alan enunciated word for word, Byakuya, no matter what your Zanpakuto's abilities are, you must always believe that there are no useless Zanpakuto abilities, only useless Zanpakuto wielders. Only by firmly believing this can you truly bring out your Zanpakuto's full potential. If a Soul Reaper doesn't even believe in his own Zanpakuto, how can he excavate and develop its abilities? I understand, Uncle. Byakuya Kokaki committed Alan's words to memory. From Alan's earlier words, Byakuya Kokaki knew that his uncle had set up several training phases for him. However, only after completing the previous phases training to Uncle Alan's satisfaction and meeting his requirements would Uncle Alan open up the next phase of training for him. Just like now, although Byakuya had already achieved his Zanpakuto's initial release a few days ago, it was only today after Uncle Alan acknowledged his mastery of the 4 Soul Reaper techniques that the second phase of training began. Likewise, if he didn't complete his Zanpakuto's release before the end of the 3 months, he would also miss out on the second phase of training. Then let's begin the second phase, Byakuya. This phase will involve developing and utilizing your Zanpakuto's abilities. Release your Zanpakuto and show me its power. Yes. Byakuya Kokaki held his Zanpakuto vertically before himself. Uncle Alan, my Zanpakuto's name is Senbonzakura. Its ability turns the Zanpakuto into countless blade-like sakura petals to injure the enemy. Please instruct me. Scatter, Senbonzakura. Boom. Accompanying Byakuya Kokaki's release chant, his spiritual pressure abruptly soared by over 3 times. Then, a cherry blossom glow suffused Byakuya Kokaki's Zanpakuto before transforming into tens of thousands of blade-like sakura petals that swirled towards Alan under Byakuya's control like a pink morning mist. Facing the incoming swathe of cherry blossoms, Alan swung his sword, instantly sending out several sword beams that scattered the petals. On the other side, perhaps due to it being his first time releasing his Zanpakuto, Byakuya Kokaki's control over Senbonzakura was lacking. After Ailen's sword beam scattered the tens of thousands of blades, Byakuya Kokaki's control over them weakened until he unleashed his spiritual pressure and swung the hilt to bring Senbonzakura's blades swirling around Ailen for another assault. Swish 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 swish. Boom. However, no matter how Byakuya Kokaki controlled the myriad blades to form a storm or surge forth like floods, Ailen dispersed all of them swiftly. The scattered blades posed no threat at all to Ailen. Damn it! Byakuya Kokaki erupted with spiritual power. Bursting out from the hilt in his hand were copious amounts of cherry blossom blades that joined the assault on Ailen amidst his swings. But by the time Byakuya Kokaki exhausted his spiritual power, with the thousands of blades withdrawing back into the Zanpakutos hilt and Senbonzakura's initial release ending, he still hadn't made Ailen budge an inch. This dealt a huge blow to Byakuya Kokaki's confidence. He knew that with Uncle Ailen suppressing his strength to be on par with him, he could contend against Ailen for a period relying solely on the 4 Soul Reaper techniques. Yet after releasing his Zanpakut and utilizing only its abilities, he couldn't even make Ailen move a single step. Were his Zanpakut abilities too weak? Fortunately, before this thought could fully form in Byakuya's mind, he immediately recalled Uncle Ailen's earlier admonition. Hence, Byakuya Kokaki swiftly repeated in his heart, Senbonzakura's abilities are the strongest. My inability to display Senbonzakura's full might lies in my inadequate usage and development of it. After muttering this to himself several times, Byakuya Kokaki regained his calm before opening his eyes to look at Uncle Ailen again. Not bad, Byakuya. Your Zanpakutos abilities are very powerful indeed. However, you had some misunderstandings about your Zanpakutos abilities earlier. Chapter 68, Senkei. Misunderstanding Senbonzakura's abilities. Hearing Uncle Ailen praise the might of his Zanpakut, Byakuya Kokaki felt delighted. The earlier feeling that his Zanpakut was weak instantly dissipated. This was something he couldn't accomplish even after mentally reciting Uncle Ailen's initial words multiple times. In fact, Ailen's words made Byakuya Kokaki truly believe that he had failed to fully utilize his Zanpakutos potential. If it had been anyone else saying those words, Byakuya Kokaki would have already silenced them with his blade. But since it was Uncle Ailen who spoke, Byakuya Kokaki sincerely sought his guidance. Please teach me, Uncle Ailen. Long ago when he was first heavily injured by Uncle Ailen and witnessed one of the thousands of Zanpakut being released by Uncle Ailen to heal him, an extremely bold conjecture had formed in Byakuya Kokaki's heart. Could Uncle Ailen release all of those thousands of Zanpakut and obtain the abilities of thousands of Zanpakut? While other Soul Reapers could only possess a single Zanpakut, Uncle Ailen was already a man in command of thousands of them. In terms of comprehending Zanpakut abilities, Byakuya didn't think there was anyone in this world who could match up to Uncle Ailen. Earlier, you said that Senbonzakura's ability was to transform its blade into tens of thousands of blade-like sakura petals. However, during our earlier battle, I discovered that aside from the initial petal blades transformed from the Zanpakut itself, there were also many more blades that emerged later through the conversion of your Ryuryoku from the hilt. In other words, Senbonzakura's true ability is to convert your Ryuryoku into blade-sized sakura petals. The stronger your Ryuryoku, the more blades that can be transformed from Senbonzakura's Shikai. Byakuya Kokaki felt sudden comprehension. Indeed, indeed. After releasing his Zanpakut, he had used a move like Ryuryoku Burst which clearly allowed him to sense his Ryuryoku transforming into even more blades. Byakuya, I have to say, your Zanpakutos abilities are very powerful. However, your current Ryuryoku is too weak, severely hampering this formidable power. Senbonzakura's might lies in attacks and defense through a sea-like density of blades. But with your present Ryuryoku, even after releasing Senbonzakura, you would at most be able to reach tens of thousands of blades. That is completely insufficient to display Senbonzakura's true power. After hearing Ailen's words, Byakuya Kokaki couldn't help letting out a sigh. He raised his Zanpakut before his eyes. I'm sorry, Senbonzakura. With such a useless master like me, you are unable to bloom with your radiance. But believe me, I will diligently cultivate and strive to have your petals blanket all of Soul Society. Buzz. As though understanding Byakuya Kokaki's words, the Zanpakut in his hands trembled slightly, as if in response to him. After conversing with Senbonzakura, Byakuya Kokaki bowed towards Ailen. Uncle Ailen, even if I can only display a portion of Senbonzakura's power, I am unwilling to fail Senbonzakura's formidable name. Please teach me. Rise, Byakuya. Ailen helped Byakuya Kokaki to his feet. What do you think we're doing now? Am I not teaching you already? Based on Senbonzakura's abilities, I have 2 weapons here with similar capabilities. Next, I will battle you using these 2 weapons. As for how much you can learn from me, that depends on you. The blue glow faded away. Byakuya Kokaki's Ryuryoko had been fully restored. Towards this bandage capable of completely restoring his condition, Byakuya Kokaki was already long used to it. With Byakuya Kokaki's current abilities, condensing Reishi to traverse the void was no difficult feat at all. After the void bandages danced away, he slowly descended to the ground. I've recovered, uncle. Then let's begin, Byakuya. Aelin stretched out a hand. Among the thousands of Zanpakut, one transformed into a streak of light that shot right in front of Aelin. Aelin felt somewhat awkward. This guy, wasn't it because Aelin had said its abilities were similar to Senbonzakura's Shikai and it didn't want to give him any face? Fortunately, Byakuya was unaware the Zanpakut was sulking with Aelin. In order to conceal his awkwardness, Aelin pointed a finger at Byakuya. Byakuya, before we battle, let me introduce the Zanpakut I'll be using against you. Stepping forward a few steps, Aelin firmly gripped the Zanpakut's hilt. Shatter, Senkei. Accompanying Aelin's chant, blue glows blossomed on the Zanpakut's body. These glows spread from the hilt to the blade tip like veins, enveloping the sword. The entire blade took on a cyan color, with black veins running across it, making it seem as though the sword was formed from countless shattered fragments. Aelin drew Senkei and held it horizontally before himself. Senkei's abilities are quite similar to your Senbonzakura. However, your Senbonzakura transforms Ryuryoko into countless Sakura-sized blades. As its name suggests, Senkei was crafted from 1,000 shattered pieces. It can only split into 1,000 fragments. But Byakuya, don't look down on Senkei just because of the difference in numbers with Senbonzakura. I won't, Uncle Aelin. Byakuya Kokaki held his Zanpakut vertically against his chest. I would never underestimate you, Uncle. Scatter, Senbonzakura. Byakuya Kokaki's Zanpakut transformed into innumerable slender sakura-colored blades, surging towards Aelin under his control. Not bad, you actually took the initiative to attack first. But Byakuya, did you forget? Although Senkei can only split into 1,000 fragments, each fragment is over 10 times bigger than your Senbonzakura blades. In a flash, following the veins on its body, the Senkei in Aelin's hand fractured into 1,000 pieces. These fragments swirled around Aelin. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. With a wave of the hilt in Aelin's hand, the 1,000-blade fragments poured down like raging storms, directly scattering Byakuya Kokaki's innumerable Sakura blades. Before reaching substantial numbers, the minute Senbonzakura blades posed little threat in their attacks. On the other hand, the substantial Senkei fragments brought tremendous penetrating power when flying at high speeds. They could easily pierce through a person's body. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. After shattering Senbonzakura, these blade fragments maintained their speed as they shot towards Byakuya Kokaki. Left with no choice, Byakuya Kokaki could only utilize Shunpo to evade. Boom 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 boom. Having narrowly avoided that assault, Byakuya gazed at the deep cavities in the ground and felt his heart jolt. If he had been slower in dodging earlier, he would probably have needed healing again. Chapter 69, 1,000 Blades vs 1,000 Cherry Blossoms. Swish. Before Byakuya Kokaki could recover his senses, even more fragments from Senkei rushed towards him. Byakuya Kokaki brandished the hilt of Senbonzakura, transforming large amounts of spiritual pressure into innumerable slender sakura-colored blades to meet Senkei's incoming fragments. Boom! 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 Layers upon layers of sakura blade storms were shattered by Senkei's fragments. But under Byakuya Kokaki's control, these countless blades continued converging as one to collide with Senkei's fragments. However, while Byakuya Kokaki focused his attention on Senkei's fragments, Aelin's figure had already approached him. When Byakuya Kokaki noticed Aelin, he had already raised the hilt of Senkei high up and brought it slashing down towards Byakuya Kokaki. Swish! In the instant Aelin slashed down, the 1,000 fragments of Senkei rapidly tore through the enclosure formed by Byakuya's Senbonzakura blades, reassembling into the complete sword form as they sliced across Byakuya's body. Shik! Flicking the blood off Senkei, Aelin turned his head back, the corners of his lips curving slightly upwards. Byakuya, this is your first weakness now. When your Zanpakutos blade has all transformed into blades, your Senbonzakura loses the most basic melee attack and defense capabilities of a sword. While you're manipulating Senbonzakura to attack, your own body is practically in an undefended state. Is that so? Then I must really thank Uncle Alan for the reminder. Although there was an additional sword wound on his body, Byakuya Kokaki didn't even frown. He had gone through such injuries countless times over the past 2 months. Anyway, as long as he still had fighting strength left, Uncle wouldn't heal him. And Byakuya didn't feel like he needed healing when he still had the ability to fight. Healing? That was a privilege the victor could enjoy only after the battle ended. The loser would naturally have their soul enter the cycle of reincarnation to enjoy eternal slumber. As for why Uncle didn't directly remind him and instead attacked him first before telling him, Byakuya Kokaki understood as well. After all, what Uncle Alan adhered to was teaching without pain has little gain, pain leaves a lasting impression. Next, Byakuya Kokaki began manipulating those Senbonzakura blades that flew out to recoalesce them around the hilt, forming a new blade. Only, the sword form condensed from the countless minute blades wasn't stable. Accompanying Byakuya Kokaki's brandishes, there were still blades scattering everywhere. Alan didn't continue attacking either, allowing Byakuya Kokaki to condense Senbonzakura's fragments into a sword form. This was a step Byakuya Kokaki had to complete during his training. The Senbonzakura Alan created contained the combat experience from that Byakuya over 200 years later stored deep within Alan's memories. After Bankai, Byakuya had a move that could gather a massive amount of blades around the sword form to strengthen his slashing power Shikai, Hakuti Icon. But due to Byakuya's lacking control in condensing Senbonzakura's billion over blades into a sword form after Bankai, he could not gather all the blades released from his Bankai onto the sword in his hand. He could only gather the remaining blades behind him to form wings that increased his charging speed. If Byakuya practiced this move from now, then the might of his Bankai Shikai, Hakuti Icon which had no wings could possibly rise by several times in the future. I've kept you waiting, Uncle Alan. After who knew how long, Byakuya Kokaki finally completed the means of stably condensing Senbonzakura's blades into a sword form and once again invited Alan to battle. Oh? Not bad. Alan looked at the Zanpakuto in Byakuya Kokaki's hands. The blade was still emanating a cherry blossom glow. Then come. After speaking, Alan flash stepped right in front of Byakuya, brandishing Senkai to slash at Byakuya. Clang! 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 Sparks flew as the clashing sounds of Senkai and Senbonzakura resounded within the arena. Each collision would send some sakura-colored blades flying amidst the sparks. This was because Byakuya Kokaki's control over condensing Senbonzakura's blades into a sword form still wasn't adept enough. Each clash would shatter off a portion of Senbonzakura's blades. However, gathering tens of thousands of blades into a sword form evidently boosted Byakuya Kokaki's slashing power tremendously during each swing. At least initially in Shikai, Byakuya could only be suppressed by Alan whose strength was restricted. After recondensing Senbonzakura's released blades into a sword form, he could now block Alan's restricted attacks. As their battle progressed, Byakuya's control over condensing the blades into a sword form continuously strengthened. Towards the end, Senbonzakura's blades would no longer be shattered by Senkai during collisions. Clang! Senkai and Senbonzakura clashed once more. Senbonzakura's cherry blossom blades pressed against the cyan Senkai covered in blue vein-like patterns. Alan wielded his sword one-handed, upper body perfectly upright. Byakuya dual-wielded his sword with both hands, upper body leaning forwards. Very good, Byakuya. Condensing Senbonzakura's tens of thousands of Shikai blades back into a sword form boosts your slashing power, indicating your control over Senbonzakura's abilities has reached a certain level. But don't forget that Senbonzakura's greatest might still lies in the innumerable quantity of blades. The move you just used has you as the main offense supplemented by Senbonzakura's abilities. Have you ever considered that if you became the supplement to Senbonzakura's abilities as the main offense, what would that battle look like? Alan grinned before shockingly, the vein patterns connecting the fragments on Senkai's blade suddenly fractured at the intersection with Senbonzakura's blades, making it seem as though Senbonzakura had cut through Senkai. However, this Senkai that was sliced into two sections swiftly recovered into a complete form after passing through Senbonzakura's blades. It continued slashing down at Byakuya. Shick! Hey, not bad Byakuya, much smarter now. After recovering again under the void bandage's effects, Byakuya Kokaki went looking for Alan to continue training for the second phase. Only this time, Byakuya had evidently learned a new move. Scatter, Senbonzakura. Accompanying Byakuya's release incantation, his Zanpakuto transformed into innumerable slender sakura-colored blades swirling about. Under Byakuya's manipulation, half of the tens of thousands of minute blades returned to the hilt, condensing back into his Zanpakutos sword form. The remaining half of Senbonzakura's blades surged towards Ailen as mist under Byakuya's direction from his left hand. Swish! Facing him, Ailen didn't engage Byakuya in close combat this time. Instead, he split the Senkei in his hand into 1,000 fragments of differing sizes that bombarded Byakuya like torrential rains under his control. The earlier close combat was mainly to let Byakuya know of Senbonzakura's weaknesses after initial release as well as to have Byakuya complete the means of recondensing the released Senbonzakura. Now was the time Ailen taught Byakuya the correct way to utilize Senbonzakura. Chapter 70, Bankai, Demon Blade Senkei. Whoosh! Ailen stood motionless as the fragments of Senkei, under his will, turned into streaks of shadows that attacked Byakuya Kukaki. It was impossible for Byakuya Kukaki to completely dodge such intensive attacks. At this moment, he could only use Shunpo to move away while using the sword condensed from Senbonzakura's blades to split the incoming Senkei shards. On the other side, he used his left hand to control the other half of Senbonzakura's blades to intercept other Senkei shards. Even so, Byakuya still could not completely defend against all the Senkei shards. Some of the shards directly avoided his defense and left cuts on his body. It was impossible to completely block these attacks with just the sword in his hand and part of Senbonzakura's blades. So after running around Ailen for tens of laps, Byakuya Kukaki, after observing and understanding Ailen's attack method, also immediately stood still. He inputted spiritual pressure into Senbonzakura's hilt. A large amount of spiritual pressure was converted into tens of thousands of blades through the hilt of Senbonzakura. Then, Byakuya Kukaki gathered these blades into a spherical shield that surrounded and protected him firmly. Bang bang bang! Senbonzakura's power increases with the number of blades. The might of 100,000 Senbonzakura blades versus 500,000 blades increases by at least 2 times. Moreover, Senbonzakura has an extremely powerful trait. When Byakuya Kukaki uses both hands to control it, the speed of the blades doubles. Hundreds of thousands of sakura-colored blades revolved around Byakuya Kukaki, forming a defensive sphere over 3 meters in diameter. In terms of attack power, Senbonzakura's blades were indeed inferior to Senkei's shard fragments. However, when these hundreds of thousands of blades formed a spinning shield at an extremely fast speed, Senkei's fragments couldn't penetrate it at the same level of spiritual pressure. Not bad, that's more like it, Ailen said, seeing that Byakuya could deal with Senkei's attacks, so he didn't continue. The 1,000 Senkei shards slowly flew back to Ailen's side and recombined into a complete sword. However, Byakuya, how will you deal with it when I do this? Flawless offense, peerless in the world. Bankai, Demon Blade Senkei. When the hundreds of meters long giant demon blade fell from the sky, Byakuya Kukaki was completely dumbfounded. Boom! Ha ha ha, just kidding, don't be so petty, Byakuya, Ailen said. Inside Ailen's innate boundary, Byakuya Kukaki sat cross-legged on the ground with his back to Ailen, ignoring Ailen's apology completely. And Ailen was also paying for his own bad taste. They had agreed to train Shikai abilities, but he suddenly went Bankai to bully Byakuya. What was that about? They were happily playing with small blades, then he brought out a 100-meter great blade. Was he not playing fair? Cough cough. Seeing that Byakuya was sulking even after his persuasion, Ailen had to bring out his trump card. Ailen coughed a few times, walked seriously to Byakuya and said, Byakuya, you have really disappointed me. Once weapons are drawn, it becomes a life-or-death battle. Or for one's glory and beliefs, one must use all available means to achieve victory. So when facing enemies, kill them in one strike if possible. If that is not possible, then while ensuring one's own safety, gather as much intelligence on the enemy's abilities as possible and respond accordingly. At the beginning of our fight, you did well, probing Senkei Shard's attack speed and might at equal spiritual pressure, and came up with the idea of spinning Senbonzakura blades around yourself to counter Senkei's attacks. But your intelligence gathering on me was inadequate. You had no idea that I could even Bankai Senkei at equal spiritual pressure, leading you to near death. Didn't we agree earlier that I won't use spiritual pressure exceeding yours when fighting you, even for a Shinigami's 4 advanced techniques? I'll restrain them to levels equaling yours. Tell me, when I Bankai'd just now, did I exceed your spiritual pressure? After unlocking his true Zanpakut unlimited blade works, using other Zanpakuts only took 1/10 of Ailen's usual spiritual pressure expenditure. That was how Ailen could Bankai Senkei at the same pressure level as Byakuya Kukaki. You must remember today's lesson, or else when you meet similar opponents again, you may really die. Humph. Byakuya Kokaki let out a cold snort, but also knew that according to Uncle Alan's words, he did not break his earlier promise. He retorted directly, your spiritual pressure before Bankai did not exceed mine, but after Bankai it definitely surpassed mine. Bang! Ouch! Hearing Byakuya Kokaki's words, Alan immediately gave him a knock on the head. Are you an idiot, Byakuya? Did you forget that my Bankai is this very space? If what you said is true, that after I Bankai I can further unlock my Zanpakut powers to continuously raise my spiritual pressure, how high would my pressure become with so many Zanpakuts fully released? Byakuya Kokaki, clutching his head, also came to his senses. Indeed, if every Zanpakut Bankai could bring Alan a 5 to 10-fold spiritual pressure increase, probably no one in the entire world would have spiritual pressure comparing to Alan. According to Alan's motto, a Shinigami's battle is a battle of spiritual pressure, Alan equals invincible? That was clearly impossible. Alright, don't be angry anymore, Byakuya. Didn't I say I have 2 Zanpakuts with abilities similar to Senbonzakura? You just witnessed Senkei, which can only split its blade into 1,000 fragments. Next, do you want to see how strong Senbonzakura's abilities can become if your spiritual pressure is high enough? Byakuya Kokaki was conflicted. He didn't want to just forgive Alan, but he also really wanted to see Alan's other Zanpakut similar to Senbonzakura. Especially when Uncle said how powerful Senbonzakura could become with enough of his spiritual pressure. Humph, it was you who begged me to watch, not that I wanted to see it myself. In the end, curiosity overwhelmed Byakuya's anger. He stood up and walked to Alan's side. Can't I figure you out well? Seeing Byakuya like this, Alan just smiled. Bankai, memory release, golden sword osmanthus. Boom. That day, Byakuya's eyes were filled with the boundless golden osmanthus. Chapter 71, Dismissal. Dong. Dong. Early in the quiet Siraidai, the peace was suddenly awakened by a burst of alarm. However, from this alarm, everyone also knew that this was not an emergency alarm, it was just a summons to convene the 13 protection squad's captains for a meeting. In the Kokaki clan, when they heard this alarm, Jinrei's body shook slightly. This day had finally come. After walking out of the room, Jinrei Kokaki saw his youngest daughter and son-in-law waiting outside the door at a glance. Father-in-law. Father. Alan and Haruko Kokaki respectfully bowed to Jinrei. Father-in-law, thank you for your tolerance and accommodation of your son-in-law over the years. Having lived together for 5 years, the Kokaki clan was the most familiar home to Alan apart from the 2nd Division barracks. In addition, Jinrei's tolerance, Haruko's gentleness, and even Byakuya Kokaki's admiration, made Alan feel the warmth of family. Especially Jinrei Kokaki. When Jinrei originally selected a husband for Haruko, it was to find someone who could support the Kokaki clan after his death. However, Alan eventually went against his wishes and chose to accompany Haruko to the human world. And Jinrei also chose his daughter over the clan, allowing Alan and Haruko to go to the human world to heal. One could imagine that after Alan left, in order not to let the Kokaki clan elders gossip about Alan and Haruko, Jinrei Kokaki had to take over as the head of the Kokaki clan and captain of the 6th Division again. For Jinrei, who was on his deathbed, this could only make his death come even sooner. But even so, he didn't say anything to Alan and Haruko. Haruko, stay home and accompany Byakuya more. I'll accompany Alan to the captain's meeting this time, Jinrei said. Yes, father. I wish you safety, father. After bowing to Jinrei again, Haruko returned home to accompany Byakuya for a while longer. Perhaps from today onwards, this would be the last time she could be with her family. Let's go. Yes, father-in-law. Following behind Jinrei, Alan noticed for the first time that there was a hint of stumbling in Jinrei's footsteps. Sigh. Letting out a sigh, Alan could only comfort himself in his heart. With himself joining the Kokaki clan, at least Haruko could live, and Byakuya was also growing faster than in his memories under his guidance. At least, father-in-law didn't have to endure the grief of losing his child twice. At least he was only going to the human world and wasn't dead yet. Over the past 3 months, the people in Siraidai must have been able to estimate his strength. As such, even if he wasn't in Soul Society, if other nobles wanted to move against the Kokaki clan, they would have to consider whether they could withstand his retaliation. Amidst Ailen's chaotic thoughts, Jinrei Kukaki and Ailen arrived at the 1st Division and entered the meeting room. Seeing the retired 6th Division captain after entering, the other captains all showed surprised expressions. It seemed that today's captains' meeting had something to do with the 6th Division. Dong! After all the captains arrived, Captain Commander Yamamoto tapped his cane on the ground. 6th Division Captain, Ailen Kukaki. Captain Commander. Hearing Captain Commander Yamamoto calling him, Ailen walked out from the ranks and stood in the center of the meeting room. Humph! Captain Ailen, do you know that in order to maintain Siridi's stability, I have enacted several prohibitions? One of them is the prohibition on captains releasing their Zanpakuto and Siridi. I know. Then tell me, what have you been doing in the Kukaki clan these past 3 months? Captain Commander, because my Bankai's abilities have a certain auxiliary effect for training, I have been teaching my nephew Byakuya Kukaki these past 3 months. Training with Bankai released? Yes. Captain Commander Yamamoto looked at Ailen in surprise. This guy, was he abandoned by the Kukaki clan? Because his Bankai's abilities were effective in assisting training, Jinrei Kukaki had him aid Byakuya Kukaki in cultivating his strength. Then after Byakuya became strong enough, they would kick Ailen aside and make way for Byakuya? What a pity! Captain Commander Yamamoto imagined some of the noble's filth in his mind. Although he had been acquainted with Jinrei for hundreds of years, Genrisaya Shigakuni Yamamoto also knew the noble's nature very well. However, in the more than 1,000 years that Captain Commander Yamamoto knew of the Soul King's secrets, he had never made a move against those nobles even when he was still an assassin. Now that he had transformed from assassin to protector as Captain Commander, he naturally wouldn't make a move against the nobles either. Because that was the Soul King's will. Betrayed by the 5 great noble families, having his 4 limbs severed, eyes gouged out and heart carved out by the clan, further strips of flesh cut away to weaken him. With the Soul King's power, he could have rebelled and erased the 5 great noble families in all existence at any time. But in the face of such mutilation, the Soul King did not resist at all. So everyone knew that all this was the Soul King's own will. The foundation of Soul Society was built upon sin. The nobles were the greatest source of sin in Soul Society. It was when Genrisaya Shigakuni Yamamoto formed the Godai 13 and massacred almost the entire Soul Society before he managed to contain the spread of the nobles' sins and Siridi under the name of protection. However, Genrisaya Shigakuni Yamamoto also felt that since the Soul King did not resist, he must have seen some kind of future and chosen to let those people push the world towards that future. It's good that you admitted it. Criminal Ailen, you violated the Siridi prohibition on captains releasing their Zanpakuto and Siridi and stubbornly persisted despite the Kukaki clan lord's repeated deterrence, knowingly committing a crime. Hereby, in my capacity as Captain Commander of the 13 Protection Squads, I strip you of your position as 6th Division Captain. Do you accept the ruling? What? Captain Commander Yamamoto's words shocked all the captains present. Oh my, this is really... Shunsui Kiriko lightly pulled down on his straw hat, glancing at Old Man Yama and Old Man Kukaki from the corner of his eye, not giving his opinion. Retsu Anohana's smiling face twitched slightly, her hands wrapped under her wide sleeves and clasped tightly. What a pity! She had wanted to test her strength after these years of cultivation and see if she had reached the level where that man from many years ago would be pleasantly surprised instead of unconsciously lowering his strength to match hers. As for the other captains, they were also shocked. One had to know that the captains of the Godai 13 were already standing at the pinnacle in Siridi. Since the founding of the Godai 13, only captains who died in battle or retired had their positions removed. There had never been a captain who was outright dismissed. Chapter 72, Farewell. However, today, Ailen would become the first captain to be dismissed. In a sense, it was also nailing Ailen to the pillar of shame for the captains. With Ailen's powerful strength, would he willingly have his status and position stripped away? Thinking of this, several captains had already placed their hands on the Zanpakutos at their waists. If Ailen resisted, they would release their Zanpakutos at the first moment. Otherwise, based on the spiritual pressure they had sensed from Captain Ailen these past days, I'm afraid not many of the captains present could fight against Ailen. However, beyond their expectations, in the face of Captain Commander Yamamoto's verdict, Ailen did not object. Captain Commander, accepting punishment for violating prohibitions is only right. What's more, you've already given me 3 months to correct myself. I fully accept the punishment you have given me. All right. Upon hearing Ailen say such words, Everyone knew that this was just an act. A play that started directing 3 months ago. It was just that they didn't know what roles Yamamoto, Jinrei Kokaki, and Ailen had taken on in this affair. The only person in the room who probably knew Ailen's intentions was 2nd Division Captain Yoriuki Shion. This guy is quite upright. After Ailen acknowledged Captain Commander Yamamoto's verdict, this captain's meeting soon came to an end. Next, under the other captain's witness, Ailen took off his captain's Hayori and Jinrei Kokaki retook his position as 6th Division Captain. Father, Byakuya, take care of yourselves. At the Kokaki clan gates, Haruko Kokaki hugged Jinrei Kokaki and Byakuya Kokaki before wiping away the tears at the corners of her eyes and returning to Ailen's side. Byakuya, remember that if the Kokaki clan or 6th Division encounters anything too difficult to resolve in the future, come find us in the human world through the Kokaki clan's Senkaimon. Don't try to tough it out alone. Father-in-law, when you're free, come to the human world more often to visit Haruko. When this little guy Byakuya can stand on his own, father-in-law should just come live with us in the human world. Ailen's words made Jinrei a little moved. But soon he shook his head. Let's talk about this in the future. Jinrei felt that his time limit was probably within the next 10 years. While under Ailen's 3 months of guidance, Byakuya's strength had grown tremendously. He now had the power to serve as 6th Division Vice Captain. However, for Byakuya to complete his Bankai training and inherit his position as 6th Division Captain, he needed at least 10 more years. That meant Jinrei almost definitely wouldn't live to see that day. Don't worry. When my time comes, I'll have Captain Shion pass you a message to come give Byakuya a hand. Ailen didn't want to talk about life and death with Jinrei now and make Haruko sadder. Seeing the skies darkening, he bid farewell to Jinrei and Byakuya. Time is running short, so we'll be going now, father-in-law, Byakuya. Travel safely. Oh? Captain Shion, 3rd Seat Urahara, you're here so early. When Ailen brought Haruko to Kisuke Urahara's underground base with Shunpo, he immediately sensed the two's spiritual pressure. Ha ha ha, after I saw you accept old man Yama's verdict at the captain's meeting without any complaint, I knew you were anxious. As soon as we left the 1st Division, I went to drag this guy out from his bed. Shion Yoriuki pointed at Kisuke Urahara as she spoke. Ailen followed her hand and almost jumped in fright. That messy bedhead, the dark panda eye circles, his entire body emanating a decadent aura, this was Kisuke Urahara? Ah, in order to make great jigaes for Miss Kokaki and Captain Ailen, I've hardly slept well these past 2 months. Urahara yawned lazily. Oh. Ailen was puzzled. 3rd Seat Urahara, does it require so much time just to make a jigai? What's more, I'm no longer 6th Division Captain. Just call me by name. If Ailen remembered correctly, when the Godi I-13 and Hueco Mundo Arancars fought in his memory, the Shinagamis led by 10th Division Captain Chuer Hitsugaya seemed to be directly using jigaes in the human world. Could it be that jigai production technology had made breakthrough advancements over the past 200 years, allowing jigaes tailored for Shinagamis to be produced immediately when needed? No, if it's just ordinary jigaes, I can mass-produce them here. Hearing Ailen doubt his abilities, Kisuke Urahara reflexively retorted. However, those kinds of jigaes can only be used by Shinagamis stationed in the human world for a period of time. The jigaes prepared for Mr. Ailen and Miss Kokaki are meant for permanent residency in the human world. Thus, these 2 jigaes need 100% compatibility with your souls. Like so, you two can directly live a lifetime in the human world without needing jigai replacements. Come, let me bring you to see your new bodies. After speaking, Urahara brought the 3 before 2 stone pillars. After inputting some Ryatsu on the side, a rotating blue portal formed between the pillars. This is a Senkaimon. Ailen was surprised. It wasn't his first time seeing a Senkaimon. He had used the Kokaki clan's personal Senkaimon several times. However, the Senkaimon before Ailen now was clearly different from the Senkaimons used by the Godi I-13 and Kokaki clan. Urahara, your Senkaimon seems different from what I've seen. Are you sure this thing is safe? Oh? So even Captain Ailen noticed. Hey. Urahara feigned surprise. Although Ailen had told him not to address him as captain, Urahara didn't seem to have heard, still calling him Captain Ailen. The Senkaimon used by the Godi I-13 was left behind in Soul Society and Human World by the Soul King since Genesis as a safe access tunnel connecting both worlds. My Senkaimon here was created after analyzing the Gargantia used by Hollows. Compared to the Godi 13th Senkaimon, the risk is indeed slightly higher. Seeing the distance indicated between Urahara's thumb and index finger, Aelin sneered internally. To think this guy Urahara understood fingertip universe. However, for us, that bit of risk is probably smaller than an ordinary Shinigami facing a low-level hollow. Indeed, with Aelin, Uruaki, and Urahara's strength, even if something went wrong with the Senkaimon and they fell into Hueco Mundo, they could still forcefully fight their way back out. Chapter 73, Omnipotent Five Sights. The Gargantia used by hollows entering the human world or soul society is a kind of instinctive use of spatial abilities by hollows. Kisuke Urahara was able to analyze the spatial power within the Garganta and created the Senkaimon, truly deserving to be the most intelligent Shinigami. Because the Senkaimon created by Kisuke Urahara belonged to smuggling, there were no safety guarantees. It was very likely to encounter spatial storms or time distortions like the Kutatsu while passing through the spatial tunnel. However, while those things posed dangers for ordinary Shinigami, for Aelin's group they were things that could be casually dismissed with a wave of the hand. Let's go, everyone. After all, something like a Jigai can only exist in the real world. The Soul Society is merely a dwelling place for souls, Jigais cannot exist there. Let's go. Aelin nodded in agreement. After speaking, Aelin slipped his arm around Haruko Kokaki's waist and carried her as he followed behind Kisuke Urahara into the Senkaimon. Oh! Upon just entering the Senkaimon, Aelin felt the space under his feet give out and his heart stirred. Spirit particles under his feet condensed, stabilizing his body and continuing to follow behind Kisuke Urahara. Oh my, I'm really sorry Captain Aelin. I just forgot to tell you earlier that because of time constraints, I haven't finished laying down the spatial passageway here. I could only use spirit particles to pave a path. However, as Kisuke Urahara turned back after speaking those words, he discovered that contrary to what he imagined where Aelin would have fallen beneath him, Aelin's position was actually higher than his own. Such a cautious guy. Kisuke Urahara was slightly shocked inwardly. One had to know, Urahara had intentionally left the passageway in this Senkaimon unfinished. On one hand, he was trying to play a trick on Aelin. It was also meant as another test of Aelin. Upon entering this Senkaimon, because there was no stable spatial passageway under their feet, people would fall down until they realized to condense spirit particles under themselves to form a foothold, then they could steadily advance towards the exit. Kisuke Urahara knew this well, which was why he immediately condensed spirit particles under his feet to stand right after entering the Garganta. Yet Aelin's current position in the spatial passageway was higher than his own, proving that Aelin either possessed exceptional instincts in responding to unexpected situations, or he had made preparations to deal with all kinds of circumstances from the very start. What a troublesome guy! Although his evaluation of Aelin was already quite high, after this test of stepping into the Senkaimon, Aelin's weight in Kisuke Urahara's heart grew even heavier. It's fine, whether there's a spatial passageway or not makes no difference to me. Aelin carrying Haruko didn't react much to Kisuke Urahara's sneak attack. Before Haruko entered the Jigai and became a true person, Aelin had no intention of doing anything to Kisuke Urahara. Haruko's health took first priority. The three people moved quickly, and with no unexpected incidents encountered midway, they crossed through the space between the two Senkaimons in just a few dozen seconds and charged out from the other end that emanated a white glow. Where is this place? Right after exiting the Senkaimon, Aelin immediately knew that they had arrived in the real world. However, what surprised Aelin was that this place's layout was extremely similar to Kisuke Urahara's underground base in Soul Society. It was mostly spacious, seemingly like a training area. A&D. Aelin looked up. Blue skies, white clouds, the rising Sunday. The craftsmanship of this sky canopy probably only Sukaizen of the 5th Division Vice Captain could compare with Kisuke Urahara. Haruko, this is the real world. However, this should be Kisuke Urahara's secret base in the real world. Our Jigais should be right here. Oh my, I feel like Captain Aelin seems rather familiar with me. Just not sure if I still have any secrets left in Captain Aelin's eyes. Who knows? Faced with Kisuke Urahara's verbal probing once more, Aelin only smiled without giving a direct response. Following behind Kisuke Urahara, after a short while, the few people went up some stairs and entered a small wooden hut above ground. Lying on the bed in the room were two Jigais that resembled life-sized dolls. Captain Aelin, Miss Kokaki, here are the Jigais I produced for you these past 3 months. The one on the left is Captain Aelin's Jigai, while the one on the right is Miss Kokaki's Jigai. Once your souls enter the Jigeas, the Jigeas will modify themselves to completely fuse with your souls. You just need to lie down on them. Although Haruko was only a step away from possessing a body that could completely cure the symptoms of her soul's deterioration, she didn't immediately enter the Jigei and instead looked at Aelin. Haruko wasn't stupid. Although she was very grateful towards Captain Yoryuki and Third Seat Urahara for treating her while Aelin was away over that half year, from Aelin and Yoryuki's occasional conversations after Aelin returned, Haruko understood that Aelin must have paid some price for Captain Yoryuki and Third Seat Urahara to treat her illness. Aelin. Wait for a bit, Haruko. Under Haruko and Urahara's gazes, ripples that resembled a water's surface emanated in the space before Aelin. A Zanpakuto hilt flew out from amidst the ripples and was caught in Aelin's hand. Bankai Omnipotent 5 Sights. In an instant, the Zanpakuto in Aelin's hand transformed into a gem shaped like an eye that adhered onto Aelin's forehead, seemingly giving Aelin a third eye. This weapon was created by Aelin based on the abilities to manipulate the 5 senses from Sosuke Aizen's Zanpakuto Kyoka Suijutsus. Its prototype was the Taigu from a certain healing masterpiece in Akame ga Kill anime. After being reforged by Aelin into a Zanpakuto, its Shikai Observer allowed wielding one of 5 kinds of abilities: Insight, Clairvoyance, X-ray Vision, Future Sight, and Phantom Vision. Its Bankai Omnipotent 5 Sights then allowed complete control over all 5 visual abilities. Although Aelin felt that under the current circumstances, it was unlikely for Kisuke Urahara to have tampered with their Jigeias, Aelin naturally wouldn't skimp on making his own checks. He wouldn't entrust his and Haruko's lives solely to Urahara's goodwill. In order to investigate more thoroughly, Aelin directly activated this Zanpakuto's Bankai, unleashing Insight, X-ray Vision, Future Sight to their maximum effects. Seeing the faint glows within Aelin's pupils, Kisuke Urahara understood that this was Aelin using his Zanpakuto abilities to inspect the Jigeias. Fortunately, after seeing how cautious Aelin was when stepping through the Senkaimon earlier, the 2 Jigeias Kisuke Urahara took out were completely untouched. Aelin's gaze swept over the 2 Jigeias several times before indeed not discovering any contingencies left behind by Kisuke Urahara. Only then did he give Haruko a nod. Chapter 74, The Human World. Haruko, I'll enter first to try it out. If there are no issues, you can enter the Jigei after, Aelin said. Although he had used Omnipotent 5 Sights and not discovered any problems with the 2 Jigeias, Aelin still wanted to play it safe and try it first before letting Haruko use it. Kisuke Urahara's Zanpakuto Beniheim was one of the first Captain-class Zanpakutos that Aelin had created. From Beniheim, Aelin had absorbed over 200 years of Kisuke Urahara's future battle experience. Although this didn't make Aelin as smart as Kisuke Urahara, it allowed Aelin to understand Urahara's battle tactics to a certain degree. Even if Urahara had left seals in the Jigei that could escape Aizen's notice, with over 200 years more experience than the current Urahara, Aelin was confident he could break them using Kido. When Aelin's soul entered the Jigei on the left, the doll-like Jigei quickly took on Aelin's appearance. The red floral windflower scarf, 2 hairpins drawing the stars, his clothes changed into an elegant black and wine-red interwoven changbao. Opening his eyes, Aelin climbed out of bed and moved his hands and feet around. Compared to my Shinigami state, my strength, speed, and defenses have weakened to the extreme, just ordinary human level. My reaction speed to external stimuli has also been affected. But my spiritual pressure hasn't decreased at all. If I have to fight in this Jigei, then Kido is least affected while Zanjutsu, Shunpo, and Hakuda are almost useless. At least there are no signs of tampering in the Jigei. At this point, Aelin nodded at Haruko Kokaki, all right, it's good. You can enter now, Haruko. Within 3 seconds of Haruko entering the Jigei, it had taken on Haruko Kokaki's appearance. How do you feel? Seeing Haruko open her eyes, Aelin hurriedly helped her up from the bed and asked in concern. Although I still feel a little weak, it's like after sitting down to rest when tired and my strength will slowly recover. I feel much more relaxed, Haruko described her feelings. Of course that's how it is. Kisuke Urahara squinted his eyes and smiled, Miss Kokaki, from now on you are a true human. The weakness in your soul will continuously be nourished by your body until your soul fully recovers and you become a normal human. Thank you Urahara, Aelin smiled at Urahara and said. With Haruko's condition resolved for now, the knot in Aelin's heart finally relaxed. I won't say anything more. If there's anything you need my help with in the future, just say it. Oh right, Urahara. Since we'll be living in the human world from now on, No need to stand on ceremony. Can you lend me some of this era's circulating money? Kisuk Urahara. In the end, Urahara couldn't withstand Aelin's soft and hard pleading, and could only lend Aelin several rooms in the underground base here. Then he hurriedly left through the Senkaimon back to Soul Society. If he stayed any longer, he was worried he might lose his other assets in the human world. Haruko, from now on, here is our home, Aelin said after Kisuk left. He spent some time cleaning up the few rooms before slowly walking outside with Haruko. Look Haruko, here and here. I'm planning to enclose them with walls and make a yard. Here, I plan to dig a small pond and build a pavilion over it. Here, I'll plant some cherry blossom trees. As they walked, Aelin described to Haruko his plans to transform these rooms into a beautiful home. Only when he saw Haruko getting somewhat tired did Aelin bring her back to the room to rest on the bed. Although Haruko now had a physical body that could slowly restore her soul had been suppressed by Aelin for 5 years after all. Her recovery wouldn't happen so quickly in a short time. After Haruko fell asleep, Aelin left the bedroom and set up a defensive barrier Kido around the house called Mirror Door before starting to explore the vicinity. Kisuk Urahara had chosen this base in the human world at a remote and sparsely populated area, mainly for convenience in conducting experiments and research. In Soul Society, Haruko was a young miss of one of the 5 great noble clans, the Kukaki clan, living in riches and eating the finest delicacies, with people waiting on her for every need. Now in the human world without the backing of the Kuchikis, Aelin had to work hard for their survival. So he had to first exchange the assets left behind by Kisuk Urahara for food they could eat, then think of ways to earn money. If he brought Haruko away from Soul Society only to let her suffer, Aelin would never forgive himself. Bakudo number 55, Impeding Toe Pursuit Sparrow. As Aelin chanted, a ring of spiritual pressure emanated outwards from him. Very quickly, the circumstances within a few dozen li all around were reflected in Aelin's mind. Perhaps because of the wars, the human world's population density wasn't high during this period. Within 20 kilometers of Aelin, there were only 2 villages exceeding 100 people. All other scattered residents added together didn't exceed 2,000. Sigh, endless wars, the economy and technology cannot develop. Which of those warlord leaders can compare their lives to the Kukaki clan during this era? I cannot manage other places, but to let Haruko live comfortably, I have to ensure the villagers nearby do not suffer from wars. For now, I should make contact with these people first and see if they are interested to migrate here. After all, without using Kido now, I don't have the ability to protect such a vast area. After making his plans, Aelin spent the time when Haruko was asleep visiting those villages and scattered residents, asking if they were willing to migrate over. To build confidence in these people that he could protect them, Aelin also demonstrated some of his swordsmanship. Although his constitution was greatly weakened by the body, Aelin's boundary as a swordmaster wasn't something he could fake. His slashes carved a deep gorge dozens of meters into a small hill in the distance. And so, upon witnessing Aelin's valor, those people quickly and respectfully said they would move to the place Aelin designated. Of course, since it was nearing the autumn harvest, Aelin also allowed them to move after they finished harvesting their crops. However, before that, almost every household had to send an able person over during non-farming seasons to the area Aelin specified. Under Aelin's guidance, they began building houses and developing the land for everyone's future residence. Chapter 75, Ill Tidings. These people who were forcibly coerced by Aelin to relocate were extremely afraid of him. After all, in this era where firearms had not yet developed, Aelin who could cause such great destruction with a casual wave of his hand was no different from a god or demon in the eyes of the simple villagers. However, everyone was very respectful towards Haruko Kukaki. On one hand, Haruko Kukaki was the wife of Lord Aelin, and no one dared to disrespect her. On the other hand, when they were working, Haruko Kukaki would often prepare food and water for them, smiling and chatting with them about their daily lives, garnering everyone's support and admiration. Moreover, they also discovered that in front of Madame Kukaki, that god-demon was only an ordinary, doting husband. This also made everyone less afraid of Aelin. Especially when Aelin frankly told everyone that after everyone had relocated nearby, he would open a dojo to teach swordsmanship, and all children under 10 years old could come to the dojo to learn swordsmanship. At that moment, everyone was no longer so resistant towards the relocation. In this chaotic world, while everyone feared such great power, they also yearned for it. And this power could refer to the armies attacking everywhere outside, or Aelin's demonstrated god-demon means. Now, while they didn't have the opportunity to pursue those god-demon means, their children now had that chance. If their children obtained power as great as Lord Aelin's, who would still dare bully them? Legend says, in a beautiful village somewhere in this world called Sakura Garden Village. It was filled with cherry blossom trees, transforming into an ocean of cherry blossoms every spring. The people lived in peace and contentment, untouched by the ravages of war. Everyone who visited this village was moved by the thick atmosphere of life here, wanting to reside here long term. Some people wanted to bring their families back home and move them all to Sakura Garden Village, but sadly, after they left Sakura Garden Village and wanted to return, they could no longer find the way back no matter what. On a horse carriage filled with goods, an old man was smiling as he told stories to a few children. This was a merchant troupe. Although wars still raged all over the world now, the people of various major powers had also started noticing the shortage in resources. Thus, they kept raising the purchase prices for certain resources. Under such circumstances, to obtain more wealth, these merchant troops emerged. They traveled south and north, buying low and selling high, reaping tremendous profits. To a certain extent, the experiences of these merchant troops were no less than those nobles and warlord armies. Moreover, every place they arrived, there would be rulers who wanted to purchase news about other places from these merchant troop members. The legend this old man had just described was one that started circulating 5 years ago. Moreover, the more it was passed on, the more fantastical it became. Like how a certain ruler coveted Sakura Garden Village's bountiful harvests initially and sent thousands of soldiers to demand tributes, yet in the end only dozens of soldiers escaped with their lives while the rest were all killed by the villagers. And according to these surviving soldiers, those villagers were very powerful. Just sending out groups of children, each person could fight over 10 enemies. What was even more terrifying was that there was a devil there. With a casual wave of his hand, he could completely massacre groups of soldiers. It was also after that battle that everyone started treating Sakura Garden Village as a legend. Because after that, besides occasional news of people who claimed to have been to Sakura Garden Village, no one else could find the location of Sakura Garden Village anymore. Wow, village chief, do you know where this legendary Sakura Garden Village is? Ha ha ha, of course I know. Look. The old man sitting in the carriage pointed towards a mountain in the distance. According to the circulating information, Sakura Garden Village is inside those mountains. Back then, I was also someone who truly entered Sakura Garden Village. How is this possible? In the direction the old man was pointing, Aelin, who had just ended a day of teaching, stared at the black butterfly perched on his finger, shocked beyond belief. It had been 6 years since Aelin and Haruko Kukaki came to the real world. To allow Haruko to continue living a life not inferior to what she had in Soul Society, Aelin established Sakura Garden Village. During this time, because the news that Sakura Garden Village was developing well leaked out, it attracted some powers to attack them. Whenever it was groups of just dozens or hundreds, Aelin would have the teenagers who had trained at his dojo for a period of time deal with them. When there were thousands, Aelin personally took action to drive them away. Later on, when Aelin grew tired of these disturbances, he set up a barrier outside Sakura Garden Village that could make ordinary people unconsciously overlook the existence of the village, finally restoring peace. What's wrong? Aelin. Haruko Kukaki walked into the yard and saw Aelin's abnormal expression, hurriedly going to his side and asked caringly. Over these 6 years, Haruko's soul had fully recovered and her body was no longer frail. I just received a message from Byakuya through a hell butterfly saying father-in-law is critically ill and probably can't last a few more days. How can that be? Haruko Kukaki's body shook as her eyes reddened. Father was still hale and hearty when we left. I also find it strange. In Aelin's estimates, father-in-law Jinrei Kukaki should have been able to endure for about 10 more years. Yet now after just 6 years he couldn't hold on. There must have been some matter Aelin was unaware of. Haruko, I'll leave a few swords here to protect you and head to Soul Society to take a look. Don't leave the dojo before I return. Even if you need to head out, bring along those weapons, understand? Go on, help me apologize to father on my behalf too. Haruko Kukaki wiped the tears from the corner of her eyes and hugged Aelin. Now that Haruko's soul and body were completely fused, even if her soul left her body, there would still be a chain of fate linking both. Unless she died, her soul could not enter Soul Society in spirit form. After gently patting Haruko's back a few times, Aelin consoled, I will. Moreover, Aelin remembered that 200 years later, Kisoku Urahara had allowed human Orium Inu and normal souls Urayu Ishida and Sato Yazutora to enter Soul Society before. After he arrived in Soul Society, he would ask Kisoku Urahara about it. If Kisoku Urahara could accomplish it now, Aelin would ask him to bring Haruko Kukaki to Soul Society as well. However, before confirming whether Kisoku Urahara could do it, Aelin didn't want to raise Haruko's expectations excessively. Otherwise, if Kisoku Urahara's side couldn't do it, it would only make Haruko sadder.
Thanks for listening.